I gotta say, as the Olympic Games get underway today with the opening ceremonies are officially underway, and I know that I leave for France. I land in France a week from today. That open where Anthony and I talk about the inability to speak French becomes just a little too real. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And it's a nice banger of a Friday here. Nikki Javal is going to show up and chat with us off of practice today at 5 o'clock. Check in with my old friend Jamie Erdahl from Good Morning Football at 5:30. They relaunch on Monday. So, yeah, that's how you really know it's football season. Good Morning Football is coming back. They've moved out to LA, so we'll talk to Jamie about that. More thoughts from me and Logan coming up later as well. And it's really, we're kind of reaching the end of the first phase of training camp here. I know it's only been 3 days, but the pads start to go on and all the fans start to come. There's some changes and a sense of change as we get into this thing for real, marked by the most official way that the end of an era, the change of something could be marked, and that's that we're going to finish our preview countdowns. We will have at 4:30 the number one most important commander for 2024. I'll give you one guess on who it is. And then coming up at 6 o'clock, we will break down the quarterback room and totality, pick six style. That has been what we've done at 6 o'clock the last couple of weeks. They're all in our podcast feed. If you missed any part of it, you want to catch up this weekend, especially if you're heading out to camp on Sunday and want to have a feel for all of the groups. But one thing that kind of plays into that is today, I thought DQ showed the first signs of like, okay, we're in camp. I'm going to get asked the same questions every day. I feel like we're running out of original stuff. And, you know, you start to ask about other things that people have said. And we're kind of entering this weird period where some stuff has happened, but it's really kind of, we're watching the warm up right now almost. I don't even know how much they're evaluating yet. Of course they are, but nothing that happens now can't be overcome in the weeks to come. Once the pads go on, it becomes a little bit more real. You get out of so much specific situational work, and you just get closer and closer to the season. But we're in such a place right now where they're just working into it. And one of the questions that I thought was interesting today that Quinn got asked and the way he answered it, and I think you're still so much, like another way to put that is you're still in the tone setting portion of camp. And John Allen talked about how he has something to prove. And Dan Quinn was asked about that comment. And what he said, I think, goes to that kind of tone setting nature that he is still trying to do as the head coach now 3 practices in.
Well, I would say his coach has something to prove as well. So I think that makes not just in the locker room, but that's a lot in the building. Adam does, I do, a lot of us do. And so some of the best competitive moments in my life have been when you've had to prove it. And there's something really strong that comes from that. And I'm glad that he and his teammates feel that way because I think that'll bring out the best in us.
Listening to Quinn is refreshing in a lot of ways because, again, like the reality that he lives in, I've talked about this over the past couple of days, is not like this narrative-driven whatever, but something that I think is important to kind of keep perspective on is the things that we talk about on the outside aren't always the exact same things they talk about on the inside. The way we feel on the outside certainly not as the same as what they feel on the inside. And it's because they live it. And there's a level of detail that they live it to that is just different than kind of the bigger overarching things that we talk about. And not to say that the things that we talk about aren't important. I'd actually say it's the opposite. I'd say the things that we talk about, or at least we try to do it this way, they're the most important things, and thus we spend the most time on them. But for instance, when it comes to Jaden Daniels in the quarterback position, that's, I don't want to say it's all we talk about, but we talk about it a lot. If you're the head coach, yes, your quarterback is super important. And if you're the quarterback's coach, or maybe even the offensive coordinator, that's super important. But you've got an entire team that you're trying to coach. And so you don't spend all of this time just on quarterback. And so when it comes to narrative and stuff, like Dan Quinn was looking at it this like, I failed in Atlanta to do what I wanted to do and ultimately got fired. I haven't coached a game yet. I got a lot to prove. And so while the vibes are great and everyone's happy and everyone's like, oh, this is new, Here, he knows that's fleeting, and he knows that he's got to do it. And then, he knows that while he's going to get asked these questions at the podium and he's a realist, he knows that there's kind of this realness that happens inside the building that is their real lived experience that say he doesn't talk about the quarterback or think about the quarterback maybe as much as those of us on the outside do.
It's funny, we don't talk about him as much as we do here, inside. So he's part of the team there. And so it happens out here, but it doesn't happen inside. And that's kind of the fun part about being on a team, where everybody's role and how do we all connect, and we're an extension of each other. And so he is fully embraced in that as well. Like, not only is he an exceptional talent, like, he's an excellent teammate. And in his short time here, he's already proven that. And so people recognize that. He's got the humility and the hard work of the rookie with a little bit of swag of an older guy. And so that's a pretty nice blend to have.
Jaden talked about this today as well as Daniels went to the podium. You'll hear more from him coming up later in the hour. But I do think something that Jaden said to kind of go with that is exactly what Quinn just said. And I don't think that they've compared notes on this. I think that they're both just commenting on the reality of, again, their lived existence, their lived reality, which is Daniels looks at guys like Wagner and is like, that dude can come in here and do whatever he wanted because he's Bobby Wagner. Zach Ertz can come in here and be like, yeah, whatever, I'm Zach Ertz, like, bow down to me. And that's not how those guys are. Those guys are a part of the team. And Jaden said basically verbatim, if those guys come in and are a part of the team, like, why should I be any different? I'm just a part of the team. And I think that's something that quarterbacks have to really muster and master, like both. They have to figure it out, and then they have to become great at it. I think Brady is an all-timer at this. Brady, you hear guys like Julian Edelman talk about, and Gronk talk about how they like really played for Brady because they saw him as one of the guys that, although he was Tom Brady, like he made sure to have lunch with different guys or whatever the routines and little tricks were to make sure that he was ingratiated in the team. I don't know how much like a guy like Peyton Manning did that. Obviously Peyton was tremendously successful I think it's, from a mental like processing, all that kind of standpoint, maybe the best to ever do it. But there's these like ridiculous stories of the standard that Peyton kept, and he was part coach, part player in a lot of ways, where he was, especially later in his career, like he was like the offensive coordinator basically in Denver, and they'd hold these meetings that were like, you show up to Peyton's hotel room or in whatever ballroom in the hotel on the night before the game, and Peyton would run through the entire script and run through half the playbook. And if you were a yard off of your alignment in the ballroom of the hotel, like he was going to let you know you need to take a step outside. So like there's different ways to go about establishing a standard, establishing camaraderie, because Manning, as we all know now, is like also a huge prankster, and I'm sure he had different ways to go about that. But I think it's really important as a rookie, especially as a young player, especially. And I think we've seen some of the guys who have been here in the past and it hasn't gone great for them as young players, where they are like, yeah, I'm the first round pick, I'm the quarterback, I'm important. And there is like a star power to them, but I don't mean that necessarily as a compliment. I think Daniels has some star power, but he's also got relatability and I think a humility about him that will actually let him succeed in the long run, which is obviously very exciting. You still got to figure out how to play quarterback in the NFL or prove that he can play quarterback in the NFL. And there's a physical performance aspect to it. But from a mentality standpoint, as much time as we spend on him, he doesn't take that as anything other than just a part of the nature of the position. Not that he personally is anything special. And that's that's actually the truth as well. Like Daniels might wind up being a special quarterback, but it's not inherently because he's Jaden Daniels that he's like, oh, he's God's gift to Washington, D.C. No, he's talented. He plays quarterback, and so we talk about him a lot. And if he succeeds, then a lot of people are going to buy his jerseys and be really excited, and he's going to be their favorite player. That's the nature of the position, and he understands that on the with the proper perspective, even though he hasn't even taken his first NFL snaps. When we get back, more from Dan Quinn today, including some kind of bigger picture thoughts on where they're at as they continue in this first block of training camp. Rest coming earlier than it does for a lot of teams. The off day tomorrow. Why? Well, I'll let Dan Quinn tell you next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll reveal number one on our list of the top 10 most important commanders of the 2024 season. Again, I do not think at this point it is a mystery who it is, but perhaps you missed the first 9, in which case you don't even know. Well, where you been? It's all in the podcast feed if you want to catch up, which is nice, but we'll talk about it in a lot more depth coming up at 4:30. The Commanders camp has been different in a couple ways this year that I think is really cool and interesting. We talked yesterday about the kind of football skills camp that they seemed to put on in the middle of practice yesterday, where they had a it really was like a skills camp. And it's like, okay, you got 3 stations. We're going to work on picking the ball up off the ground when it's bouncing over here. We're going to work on, catching the ball over here. We're going to work on tackling, and not just like the defensive guys, but the, wide receivers, not just the ones that play teams, but everybody, because on an interception, like, we want to be able to chase down and make a tackle, or even chase down and understand when the best time is and the best technique to punch a football out and maybe reverse a turnover. So there's like that kind of stuff. But the other thing that's interesting is it's very clear to me that Dan Quinn has spent some time around people who understand sports science, and he understands how to get more out of his players based off of working them hard in certain spaces, resting them in others, both within a practice where they'll take some time within and be like, hey, full 2 minutes on the clock, water break, we're resting. Okay, now we want to work hard here. We're going to run between these drills. Maybe we're a little more relaxed here. Practice is laid out with the special teams drill in a certain spot to make sure that guys, guys that maybe are playing a little more on offense and defense get a rest as the team's period goes. So there's just a very smart structure to it. And that includes having an off day here 3 days in, because there is an acclimation period. There is a reality that while this is training camp and the whole point is to get ready for a season, like what you wind up doing is really hard workouts. And that's what a training camp practice is a really hard physical workout. And there's only so many of those in a row you can do, even especially as you're trying to get into shape to be able to do that on a more regular basis, to get ready to play in a game that is 3+ hours long on Sundays in the fall, and especially early in the season, and in pretty significant heat, depending on where you go. You think week 1 for Washington in Tampa, like that's not going to be chill in any respect. So, Dan Quinn was asked today about resting, both within practice and the fact that they're actually taking a rest day tomorrow, just 3 days into camp, where a lot of guys or a lot of coaches will have it be 4, 5, even 6 days in.
Yes, you have to, because I guess our times together are really intense. They go all the way through, so those little resets, they can help. What went well in my 3 days that I did? What was 1 or 2 things that I really nailed, I've been working on? What's the one thing on this next 3-day block? By the time that's over, I want to have addressed that as well. So small margins to get better.
And that ability to take time, reflect, slow down, think, recharge, like all that stuff is really important. I'm going to put on Matt Essig's in for Ant today. So Essig, first of all, appreciate you sticking around
Not a problem.
After the Russell show. I'm going to put on my trainer hat for a second here. One of the things that we talk about with our athletes is we want our easy days easy, we want our hard days hard. And the reason is, if you do your easy days hard, it's like, I'm going to do extra. Your hard days actually don't wind up being hard. You just wind up being tired. So you wind up having easy days, medium, hard days, medium, and that doesn't actually accomplish what you need, because if you don't eventually go hard, you don't raise your ceiling. And you actually don't raise your floor either, which is also really important.
I have a really good story, I guess, in that regard. When I was training NCAA for our dry land, our coach decided that he wanted
you were
us.
You were a swimmer.
I was swimmer, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, a little bit aside.
I know what dry land means. I don't know that everyone realizes that you were
dry
training
land is
for what?
For swimming.
You're doing your training not in the water.
Correct.
For folks that didn't put that together. Okay, so Matt was a swimmer and he was doing dry land training.
And our dry land, we did a lot of I'm totally blanking on the exercise style. It's really fast, high intensity.
CrossFit.
We were doing CrossFit.
Oh,
we did
okay.
a lot of CrossFit just because that builds a lot of the explosive muscles that you need for swimming, for getting off. And then also because of the extended weightlifting that you do for the longer sessions, that's good for the distance. It's actually a really good comparison. Now,
Interesting.
I had just started to learn how to properly do Olympic lifting, and I decided after an easy practice one day, hey, I'm going to go home and I'm going to see what I can max clean snatch. Ended up doing a great workout, was exhausted, went to practice the next morning. All right, guys, we are doing a major clean workout.
You were terrible.
I was awful. I was like, guys, I promise I was doing 40 plus pounds more yesterday.
You didn't have a chance when you walked in.
No, I was shot.
Easy days easy,
hard days hard.
And DQ understands that. And they want these training camp practices, like pretty much every day is, I'm guessing, going to be hard. There's going to be probably 1 or 2 easy days. That's pretty typical for a training camp where it's like, okay, we're going to design the drills. And it's not like when you go out there, you're like, today's an easy day, I'm going to lollygag around. No, it's, hey, the threes are going to get a lot of work. So maybe for the ones, it's an easy day, but for the threes, it's a hard day. And the practice is a little bit shorter, and they cut the reps, and they find ways to make it easier, where you're still getting the quality is high, but the beating on the body. Because I think that's one thing that like we almost take for granted is you have to be in shape. And like the level of what it means to be in shape for a professional athlete is just so extraordinarily high that there is a sports science, strength conditioning element to this. And I feel like DQ as a football coach really understands that and has clearly surrounded himself with really smart, good people who are guiding what we would call the periodization, the segmenting, the long-term planning of how these practices are put together.
And what I like with seeing all of this is that we're seeing with the whole like easy days are easy, but hard days are hard. Easy days can also be heavy technique days. Yeah. Not you're going to be running, you're going to be lifting, you're going to be pushing, you're going to be hitting. Instead, hey, we're going to get you into the stance maybe 40 times, and I'm going to move your legs, and until you can get into the 3-point stance we like, we're just going to keep doing it.
Yeah,
and that's a practice.
Yeah, the hand fighting techniques, let's practice releases, but maybe it's not full speed because we're working on the footwork. They did a great job of that in the individual period yesterday. I was watching the receivers. It was funny because they pulled out these ropes, like kind of the tug of war, like big battle rope looking things. And they were fairly short, but they were like, let's say like an inch or so, inch and a half, 2 inches in circumference or in diameter. And I was like, wait, are they going to work on grip strength and play tug of war? Because that would be fun. They didn't. They just had them be things on the ground to run around. But Bobby Ingram was very specific in his coaching points, and he's like, I want this first part, this run up, whatever tempo you need to get the footwork right. And so you're 100% right. Like as they're in this ramp up period, they're making sure that the execution of the skills are really high. And you have to do that stuff at the right ramping level, because if you try to do it too fast and let the details slide, when it's time to do the skill that you need, whether it's getting in the right stance, whether it's a hand-to-hand combat inside, whether it's dipping your shoulder on some kind of pass rush move, whether it is a footwork to get from your stance into a pursuit as a linebacker. Obviously, defensive back is super technical. You try to do it at speed and you haven't mastered it at not speed, and you don't have a chance at speed. Your brain's going to overload. You're going to screw something up. You might trip and fall and just like totally eat it. So I love to see kind of how they've ramped it up. And to me, it's just super clear DQ understands this stuff. By the way, real quick, Maddie, how did I not know that you were a swimmer?
I'm not sure.
What did you swim?
Like I've mentioned. I was a mid-distance swimmer. Freestyle, backstroke, and then I also did the 4 a.m. So 2 free, 5 free. Those were my 2 best events.
So are you like a huge fan of the sport still? Like, are you psyched for the Olympics in like an absurd way for swimming?
I am. I'm less excited just because I don't personally know as many Olympians. My one claim to fame was back in 2010. I got to go out to California to compete at the Southern California Grand Prix. And nice. It was a great time. I swam the 2 free there. Just so happened that Michael Phelps also swam the 2 free at that event. So
what's the time gap between you and Michael Phelps in 2010?
Time, I'm not entirely sure. I do know that there were 218 competitors in that event. I came in 216th, and he won it. So
probably significant.
It was significant,
Yeah.
but I still competed against Phelps.
Did you were you in his heat at
Oh,
any
God,
point?
no.
Okay.
I was like 30 minutes before.
Okay.
He was, when we were warming up at the same time, but when I was doing about 80% build to get to speed for swim, he was just kicking, and we were going the same speed.
See, that's what we need in the Olympics. There was I don't know who put it on, but the BBC did a filming of it, and there's these like $40,000 treadmills that they have that you wear the belt for, and so it's an overspeed treadmill, and the whole point is like try to get your legs to move faster than they can move naturally. But they set it to Keely Hodgkinson's 800-meter record. So Keely Hodgkinson, British half miler, just set the national record. I think it was the European record, and it is pushing like the world record. I think it might have actually been the world record. And she did that at the British trials, and so they put the treadmill at that speed, and it's like how long can average people keep up with her? And like there was one dude who actually made it over a minute, which is crazy impressive. Like insane. That means he's running like a 50 something. Like he made it over 400 meters. He made it over a quarter mile at that time because it was like a 154, 800. It's just insane. But like, I don't think people realize even at the distance events, like
Oh, no.
Kipchoge's world record marathon pace would mean running a lap, 400 meters in 67 seconds. That's so fast. I don't think I could do that. And I'm in what most people consider pretty good shape. That is blazing. Like that's the fastest I've ever run at my absolute peak in my mid-20s. I think I ran a 66 once. And that would be like in spikes. And he's doing it in marathon shoes. And he does that, I think it's 106 times as a marathon. And I don't think I could do it once. And swimming, I remember one time my buddy Sam and I were working out. And we were doing a pool workout. We're drylanders who were trying to swim, Matt. Not good. And we like went 50 free as hard as we could. And we were well behind Ledecky's 1500 pace.
So they actually, it's funny that you mentioned the treadmill. When I got to work out for a little bit, because I went on a training trip to Colorado Springs.
At the USA Training Center?
And they
awesome.
have that actually. It's a pulley system that you connect yourself with a belt, and it will pull you across the pool at world record pace, American record pace for any it's all locked in. And let's just say you push off the wall and all of a sudden you're just being dragged by your hips.
That's awesome.
So much fun.
Is it scary?
A little bit, because you're like, I'm pulling water, but there is no momentum because I'm just getting dragged from my hips.
I didn't realize they had that for swimming. That's incredible. That's really cool. I would just be like, I don't want to get water in my nose. This is bad. All right, we get back. Who is the most important Washington Commander for the 2024 season? Our countdown ends with number 1. We reveal it next. It's Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Nicki Jhabvala joins us at 5 o'clock talking Commanders. And coming up next, we will take your calls on expectations for the player we're about to reveal as the number one most important Commander in the 2024 season. As a recap, and again, all of these are available in our podcast feed. Just search The Hoffman Show in your favorite podcast app. And then we'll actually be re-releasing them all on YouTube day by day starting next week when I am off to Paris for the Olympics. If you'd like to watch them on demand, we'll make a nice little neat playlist for you on YouTube. That's something we can do. Very nice. Love that. At Craig Hoffman. But number 10 on our countdown was Dorrance Armstrong. Number 9 was Emmanuel Forbes. Number 8 was Brandon Coleman. Number 7 was John Allen. Number 6 was Quan Martin. Number 5 was Deron Payne. 4 was Bobby Wagner. 3 was Terry McLaurin. 2 was Frankie Louvu. And that leaves, as we hit the music and reveal,
number 1,
Jayden Daniels. Yeah, you knew who it was going to be. Like, let's be honest. It's always the quarterback is the most important position. But especially considering the stakes for Jayden and the franchise, considering what he is, number 2 overall pick, young quarterback, first pick of the Adam Peters era. He represents so much. So we can talk about that bigger picture stuff in a second. But let's start off with just Daniels as a quarterback. This is a kid who processes things seemingly very well. He seemed to have a very simplified offense at LSU. So what does it look like? I think Cliff Kingsbury obviously plays a tremendously important part in all of this and his ability to create clean, easy looks. But I also think Daniels is capable of more. I think that he has learned how to learn, which is an incredibly valuable skill. He knows how to get, what the information he needs, play in, play out. And he's also got all the tools. And I think that watching him practice and watching the ease with which he does everything, the mental resiliency he shows by just not being stressed ever, allows a freedom and a creativity to his game that I'm excited to see get unlocked, because we actually haven't even seen that much of Jayden Daniels yet. For all we've watched in the spring and all the things that we think that we've learned about him and the things that maybe we have learned about him, there's so much more. They've done a lot of situational work. He has shown tremendous aptitude for clock management, for game management, for understanding pressure, for having a feel for it, for mastering some of the little things at the quarterback position that, frankly, some guys just never get to, nevertheless master. Things like hard counts, like snap count. He really understands that stuff. He got, I think on Thursday, he had 3 different times he had defensive linemen jumping off sides. And part of that might be because these defensive linemen are being told, hey, we want to be ultra aggressive. And it's kind of in Dan Quinn's mantra to not care as much about making mistakes in the name of aggression, specifically along the defensive line. But the fact that Daniels is manipulating that already, it puts it in the back of those guys' heads, and it does prevent them from jumping the snap count. It's a good reminder for him to mix that stuff up during the season, during actual games. And so the fact that he's already doing some of this veteran, beyond 101 quarterbacking stuff, and he hasn't really even done a whole lot of actual practice quarterbacking that isn't situational work in training camp yet, is pretty impressive stuff. Obviously, the accuracy, the timing, the rhythm, all that stuff's going to come with more reps, and that's going to take, games upon games upon games to understand where he's at an NFL level. But all you can do so far is judge based off of what we've seen, and I would say through the spring and here into the fall, it's pretty good. You then get to how you actually judge him. Because if we're going to say he's the most important commander for 2024, on some level it's self-explanatory, right? If Daniels is CJ Stroud 2.0, then the Commanders could very easily be the Texans 2.0, or at least like 1.5. I don't know that they're going to have the defensive year that Houston had with D'Amico, and Will Anderson came in and was awesome for them as a fellow top 5 pick with Stroud last year. Like, there's a lot that went right. And they had been building some infrastructure for years. That is something that I think is underrated in Houston's jump last year, was they had built some scaffolding underneath the rookie quarterback, underneath D'Amico, Caserio had been there for a couple years. So they had done some good work. And now they're ready to launch off of that. They got the quarterback. Then it's like, oh, God, this guy's ready to be good right now. Let's go get Stephon Diggs. Let's go get the running back, Joe Mixon, they brought in. Like, let's go do some of those things to take this team to the next level and take advantage of the rookie quarterback contract. That hasn't happened here in Washington, which I think is something to keep in mind, even if Daniel starts playing well and they're struggling defensively. Like, this is year one. Or if there's, hey, the wide receivers aren't up to snuff. Hey, the left tackle situation doesn't plan out. There's only so much you can do in one off season. But I think Daniels has the ability, because he's a quarterback, and this is how this league works, this is how the sport works, to take a team that is in year one of a rebuild, that is coming off of one of the worst rosters in the league, a 4-win team last year, and go, okay, cool, let's go win 10 games because I'm good enough and competent enough and I manage the game and I don't turn the football over. I create big explosive plays with accurate throws down the field. I can run for 50 yards if you give me a crease. Like, all these things are there to potentially get to. And I think for me, the big the big measurement of success in 2024 for Daniels is how often do we see that? Obviously, the best case scenario is with consistency, because greatness is ultimately about that. It's about having a floor underneath you, and even on your quote unquote bad days, your game's just not that bad. Like, okay, he only threw for 230, a touchdown, no picks, and had 50 yards rushing today. Like, if that's your worst day of the season, that means you're really good. Realistically, is he going to have a game this year where he throws for 140 yards, no touchdowns, 3 picks, and maybe a fumble? Yeah, probably, because he's a rookie, and that happens. But how consistent are you just really solid? And then how often do we see the flashes that tell you, oh man, if he can do this 5-6 times a year, we're talking about MVP candidate. We're talking about one of the best quarterbacks, a top 5 or top 10 quarterback in football. And I think he's got that talent. You don't take him at number 2 if you don't think he does. And so watching that grow this year, floor, how consistent is he? What is kind of the consistent average baseline performance? And ceiling, what kind of shades of greatness do we see? What kind of special qualities do we see? That, to me, is going to be the ultimate judge of Daniels in 2024. Put a different way, this is a great thing that I read in a book that I'm reading right now called Do Hard Things. And it talks about raising your floor and thinking about it as, what is the average of your last 5 performances? And is the better way to pull that average up? Because that's really, kind of a reflection of who you are. What are your last 5 performances? That's who you are right now, right? And if you have one awesome game and one stinker, well, they cancel each other out. And then what happens, though, if you avoid the stinker? What happens if you just have, 4 pretty solid games and 1 awesome one? That average of your last 5 performances is significantly higher than maybe even 2 really good games, 1 absolute stinker, and 2 meh ones. Like, if you can just be like, hey, he was good 4 times and he was great once. That is the measure of greatness. And that is ultimately what Jayden Daniels is building to. I don't think he'll get there this year just because he's a rookie and it's hard, and that's fine. But if somehow he does, if somehow he puts a floor under this team that says week in, week out, we've got a chance because this kid finds a way to make enough plays and doesn't make the negative plays to keep us in games, then all of a sudden we go from it's probably like a 6-win team to, hey, this is an 8-win team, a 9-win team, someone that's going to be fighting for maybe even the NFC East, depending on what happens in Dallas and Philly, and also certainly could be fighting for an NFC wildcard spot come December. So Jayden Daniels, he's a quarterback. He obviously, if all that good stuff happens, you feel really great about the future, and it affects your decision-making, your roster building. So he's so clearly the most important player for 2025 and beyond. But even for 2024, Jayden Daniels, the most important Washington Commander on the roster. So we ask you, what are your expectations for Jayden Daniels in 2024? 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. It's the Hoffman Show, taking your calls next on the Team 980 and on the free Odyssey app. The Hoffman Show, Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up at 5 o'clock, Nicki Jhabvala of the Washington Post on practice today and kind of a recap of the first couple of days. I'm sure we'll get into multiple days worth of stuff, multiple days worth of conversations, multiple days worth of reporting on Commanders camp with Nicki coming up at 5 p.m. My friend Jamie Erdahl from Good Morning Football. Maddie, I don't know if you know this, but the connection for me and Jamie, I'm not just saying that. We're really old friends. We interned together at ESPN back in the day.
Okay.
Yeah, it was me, Jamie. There's a couple other people that have gone on to some pretty cool stuff. Jonah Javad is doing TV down in Dallas. So yeah, we had a good crew.
It's crazy when you can get like an internship group or like part-time, like the starting, and then a couple years down the road, it's like, oh, wait.
It's crazy, the incubators for talent. I mean, look, I went to the ultimate one in Syracuse. I mean, we all know in this business how obnoxious we are, but there's also a reason that place works. The ESPN thing is crazy. There's like 10,000 applicants every single year for that program, or it used to be, and like 90 people get it. And I was like, wait, I got it? That's cool. So
Congrats.
That was cool. Thanks. 1, 2, 3. How many years ago? That was 2011.
It's a couple of years ago.
Yeah, 13 years.
I'm a little late, I'll be
13
honest.
years. Yeah, my internship just had its bar mitzvah.
Oh.
Mazel tov. Anyway, apropos of none of that, what do you think Jaden Daniels is going to do this year? That is our question. We've just completed our countdown. 10 most important Commanders for the 2024 season. Jaden Daniels, unsurprisingly, at number 1. So what are your expectations for him this year? Let's go to Deshaun in Hyattsville. Deshaun, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show. Do we have Deshaun? Going once.
Working or not, but,
hey, Deshaun, I'm going to have you start over just because we had a phone issue there. But appreciate you calling in and go ahead on Daniels.
Okay. You can hear me clear?
Yeah, we got you.
All right, cool. I just wanted to say, I'll revise what I said earlier. All I really want, man, I just want that relief. Stats, wins, that would be great. Obviously, it would be great. Not rooting against it at all. I just want the relief of knowing we finally got one. Because year in and year out, my heart gets torn every single season because it's like that glimmer of hope. We always do it. You know, training camp, OTAs, mini camp, stuff like that. We give ourselves that hope. But then it's like we realize and we know in the back of our heads that the guy that's throwing the ball is probably not going to be that guy. You know, he could be a guy for a year, but he's not that guy. And if Jaden can just show all of us, unanimously, we all see it, like how we saw with RG3 his rookie year. If he could just show us he's that guy, stats aside, record aside, we trust you, bro. We know that 2025 and beyond, this is your team. If he can do that, then I'm good.
Yeah, no, Deshaun, I think
that's what I really want.
Yeah, I think that you've highlighted exactly what I think most fans are going to want, but you've also highlighted, I think, something that's going to get us a lot of calls of fear next offseason, which is, depending on how it looks and depending how Jaden, comports himself and all that kind of stuff, is like, oh God, but is this Robert, right? Because you had 1 year with RG3 in 2012, and then 2013 was a disaster. And so obviously the injury at the end of 12 shapes some of that, but the way that Robert went about all that, I think, also gave people a lot of concern. And I think that's the thing that I'm most impressed with. And Deshaun, really appreciate the call, man. Thanks for calling in. 301-230-0980 if you want to get in on this as well. I think the thing that makes me so excited about Daniels is there are no hints of that. There are no whiffs of I'm bigger than the team, I'm more important than the team, of selfishness. Like, he seems to be a very selfless person who just takes the job seriously, works really hard, does what he's asked, doesn't think that he's bigger and smarter, or like bigger in importance or bigger in personality or bigger in, whatever than the coach is, and certainly not smarter than them. He's got a respect for Cliff and for Blau and for, all these guys. And I think even for a guy like, he mentioned Blau, David Blau, the assistant quarterbacks coach by name today, where he's like, that guy's been there and done that. And, he's talking about how consistent the messaging is. But if you have respect for an assistant quarterbacks coach who was playing last year and was a career, not even backup, career third string guy, like, that shows a level of humility. Like, oh, I can learn from that dude. That dude's going to help me. The relationship that he's got with Sam Hartman, the fourth string quarterback on this team, that they're kind of in this together as rookie quarterbacks. Like, I think that tells us a lot about Jaden Daniels and why I'm not going to tell you what to do with your feelings, but why I think it's okay to hope. But ultimately with Daniels, I think, showing the competence and knowing like, okay, we can focus on other stuff. We can go work on supporting this guy. And that's the last part that I'll say real quick, is the things that make me nervous about this season are not necessarily Daniels, but they are things that support Daniels, such as the O-line. But also, let's not forget, and this is why quarterback is quarterback. The quarterback has the power to control a lot of that stuff. Not that you can overcome just heinous O-line play and bad play calling and receivers dropping balls. Like, it is still a reliant position because you, as Gisele Bündchen once said, the quarterback can't throw and catch the ball at the same time. That wasn't exactly her quote, but that was the sentiment. And then everyone lived happily ever after. Sorry, that was probably a little bit of a low blow. The point is that Jaden Daniels can make the offensive line look better. Part of the problem last year was that Sam Howell was a rookie figuring a bunch of stuff out, and that came with a set of consequences for the offensive line that wasn't very good. And so I think that Daniel's ability to process things quickly, Daniel's ability to run and escape, to have a feel for the pocket, like, that's going to help the O-line from a production standpoint, even if they don't perform down in, down out that much different than last year. And that's going to help the offense. And even listening to him today, he's talking about some of the things that he's been preached to that are important. Clearly, the ones that he says are some of the ones that have really stuck. And he talks about avoiding first and second down sacks, because if you get behind the chains in this league, you're screwed. And so the fact that he's already like thinking situationally, and they haven't even done a lot of like, hey, this is first, second down, we're moving the ball, we're putting together a drive type of stuff in camp. They've done, more 2-minute and some red zone and a lot of 7-on-7 work and, whatever. And so the fact that he's like, yeah, we got to make sure we avoid first and second down sacks. And he's thinking about these things and situations, snap in, snap out, I think is really great. The fact that they're emphasizing it really early is great. That kind of the bigger picture for Jaden, but also for the team, doesn't seem to be getting lost in the details, where last year it's just like, can we run the play? And it's like, dudes can't get lined up. If they can't figure out what the split is on this formation, like, and we're freaking out about a dude being 1 yard off. And I'm not saying that's not important. Like, those details actually are really important. It's one thing I've learned, I think, really heavily from Logan doing take command these last couple of years, because he will point out like, oh, this receiver didn't get to his landmark, and I think it's because he lined up too far to the outside, and that means instead of breaking open at the exact right time, he's breaking right behind the linebacker, so he's covered. And so like these details definitely matter, but they're secondary to kind of these bigger picture things of not losing the forest through the trees. Like, it's 3rd and 7. Why are we running a 6-yard route? It's 1st down and 10, and we go play pass. Why are we taking a 15-yard sack when we had the opportunity to throw the ball out of bounds? Like, there's situational, big picture, operational, functional football things that Jaden Daniels seems to be thinking about and caring about that give me a lot of hope for him if he can operate that way in the regular season. And if he shows that level of competence, I think then as you add talent around him to make his job easier, and he progresses and gets smarter, and he learns the speed, and he gets a bigger like mental catalog of, oh, I've seen this front before, I've seen this coverage look before, I've played this coordinator before, or I've played this system before because this guy was the assistant coordinator or the assistant or the defensive backs coach 2 years ago under this coordinator, and I remember that thing from this game and what he liked to do with his coverages. Like, when you get to be Brady in year 20, like you know everybody in the league. He doesn't know anybody yet. And so as Jaden continues to grow and the talent grows around him, like, it's going to be really exciting to watch it if it goes well. And obviously some of the seeds are going to get planted this year. I kind of like hey, let's not count the season in terms of wins and losses to an extent. Of course, results ultimately do matter, but it is going to be a lot of fun. And how well Jaden Daniels does will determine a big way how this team does in 2024. We'll dive back into the QB room and some of the other guys in that room and how they can help Jaden and what impact they make on this team coming up at 6 o'clock as we wrap up our positional group previews with the quarterbacks. But next, Nicki Jhabvala stops by, talks a little training camp with us here on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We are on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. The story of Good Morning Football's relocation from New York to L.A. with someone who's relocated from New York to L.A. to host Good Morning Football. Jamie Erdahl joins us coming up at 5:30 as Good Morning Football relaunches on Monday on the NFL Network. Talk a little ball, talk a little bit about the show, do all that in about half an hour. Right now, though, closer to home, it is time for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
Joining us today, Nicki Jhabvala, Washington Post. And Nicki, just another day of practice. They get a day off. Fans will be out there. It'll be fun to see the juice for that on Sunday. Then pads on Monday. But today seemed like another kind of ramp-up practice. We did see the first interception of camp, Michael Davis, on Jaden Daniels. I'm curious what you've kind of made of the defense's performance these first 3 days. I know everyone's looking at that through the lens of Jaden, but of all the turnovers and the talk of DQ and Joe Witt Jr., what have we seen from this defense in the first 3 days?
Yeah, I mean, I think they look solid. I think every day needs to be taken into context, right? And this is something that Dan Quinn mentioned quite a bit is, not every day is the same. The drills they're running aren't the same. The number of installs they put in aren't the same. I mean, they're really on day 3 because they reinstall, the things they learned in the spring. So this is really just day 3. It was, Andrew Wiley said it was their first run period. So they're really just getting started, and the focus for these 3 days has been primarily in the red zone. So, it's not just, you can't just compare them apples to apples, but, I think they look solid. You're not seeing, the tons of picks, but we saw that last year and the secondary ended up sucking. So I don't know that that's, like the true measure. I just really like the way they look in practice, and that sounds so elementary, but it's more of, you watch them on the field and everybody's moving. There's urgency, there's competitiveness. guys seem like they want to play and like they know what they're doing out there. And that is just such a massive leap from last season. So, while that's not, their end goal to stop there, obviously, it is a drastic improvement. So yeah, I think they look good, but it's still so early to really judge any player or position or positional group or anything like that. So, yeah, they're just really getting started.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. But to your point, you can't get to the next step if you don't have the first one of knowing what you're doing. So the fact that they've already passed that test is an improvement. Then again, the bar is so low from last year. Like, who knows what that gets you? The other thing that I've noticed defensively is the communication is just outrageously different. Where do you think that stems from? Is that something that's player driven? A guy like Wagner coming in? Is that Joe Witt, Dan Quinn? Some combination of all those things?
A combination. I really put a lot on the coaching staff. And I think much of it is, and you've heard players say this, and you've heard them say it last season, where they felt like they were getting different messages. From head coach down to assistants and positional coaches. The further down you went, you would get different messages, be it in game or in general things. Many times this year, players have stressed that the messaging has all been the same. So they've been on the same page, which is key. So clearly the communication from the staff to the players is working. And then you bring in guys like Bobby Wagner, guys like Jeremy Chin, guys like Austin Eckler and Zach Ertz, and, who have done this with now multiple teams and really know how it should go. And I've done a good job of setting the tone. I feel like the Commanders didn't have that voice really at all last year. I mean, Sam Howell being a fifth-round rookie quarterback, really. I mean, it was his second year, but it was more like a rookie. You didn't have sort of that cloud, I guess, to really speak up. It was really Terry. And then on the defensive side, I don't feel like they had that voice, and that was a large part of the problem, especially on the secondary. So, yeah, I think that communication is just, it's paramount. I mean, you can't, like you said, some of the foundational blocks, that's huge right there.
For Terry and John, as Nicki Jhabvala is our guest, of course, Washington Post, NFL and Commanders beat reporter, doing a great job at the Post. For Terry and John, I think they're in such an interesting spot because they're still probably more than anyone else the faces of the franchise. Daniels, of course, entering that group by nature of being the number 2 pick and a quarterback. But those two are the longtime vets. They've been around, and they've just been around a lot of bad ball. And I feel like they are both still expected to be leaders. They're two of the first guys at the podium, which is always, tells us a little bit of something, even if it's how the politics of the place work. But they're also, I think, both learning a lot. What have your conversations been like about them and to whatever extent you've got a chance to talk to them, with them through the spring and in these first couple of days of camp?
Yeah, they seem really refreshed mentally. Like, Terry, especially with the quarterbacks he's played with, he just, every year it's at least a couple guys, it feels like, that he's got to get used to, that he's got to transition to. And it's a lot. It can wear on you as a player. And John as well. I mean, he's been here longer, right? Yeah, he's been here longer.
Yeah, he has.
And, just the turnover at every level is just, yeah, it takes a toll. But it does feel like with this regime, and I know we've said this in the past in all seasons where you feel like there's change and it really is going over well with players. It all comes down to whether they win, of course, on whether this feeling sticks. But it does feel like they have more confidence going into this offseason just because of the wholesale changes of the franchise. It's not just the owner, which is a massive piece. It's the front office. It's the personnel staff. It's the coaching staff. It's everything. And the entire practice structure. I think that was a real sticking point with players last year. It was just such a point of frustration because, it's been well documented at this point. Just, how they felt like they went into the season and they were just unnecessarily exhausted and, at risk for injury. So they really like the structure. I think one of the really interesting things that veteran players like Terry and John have brought up, and Dan has mentioned, is sort of this emphasis on rest periods, which is a total 180 from last year. As you mentioned, they have a full rest day tomorrow after 3 days of camp. Usually, I think most teams go a full week before they get their full rest day, and they have rest periods during the days. So they'll have a recovery period in between, practice, meetings, walkthrough. They'll have time to just unwind. And Quinn thinks that's important, and players agree. So, it's a whole new era.
Yeah, for sure. Science would agree as well. But, what do the scientists know? So one of the interesting things that I have noticed from a structural thing in practice, and obviously I'm sure noticed it as well, I'm just curious what you make of it, is like the general football skills training that they're doing. And they had that one period on Thursday where they're it's like a station work. And it's like, hey, we're going to scoop here. We're going to do some catching here. And it's literally everybody on the team, but the quarterback's a specialist. And I think the O-line wasn't in that period. But when you hear coaches talk about, like, we want to preach the fundamentals, to see a coach and Quinn and the staff do it like that, I'm curious, one, as someone who's covered other teams and has great relationships around the league, like, have you heard or seen something like this before? And then also, what do you generally make of that, like, general football skills emphasis on top of just running plays all the time in practice?
Yeah, I've seen other staff do it. But mostly, in my experience anyway, I mean, there's certainly been people who have covered the league longer and been with more teams. But mostly from my experience, it's coaches just say they're going to do it, but don't really do it. And then, just believe, well, you're at the professional level. You either know how to do this or you don't. Some of it is circumstantial too. Like if they're just, spread too thin, they don't all the time, whatever. But this group, it's been their emphasis from day one, and they've actually held to it. And it's similar to Adam Peters' approach. He said he wants to build through the draft, and he's stuck to it. And that's refreshing to see, because there are a lot of times where it's just talk, and you don't really see it play out on the field, and you're like, all right, we're just spinning our wheels here. But there definitely has been an emphasis on teaching. Which I think is vital for the young guys, including, especially really the young guys that came in, in recent years and still don't know some of this stuff. Guys like Emmanuel Forbes, Jamin Davis are really getting some of the teaching that they need, and is only going to help them throughout their career.
This is a loaded question, so I'm just going to apologize, and then I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you think that other coaches that, say, we have covered or that you have covered, they think they're doing a good job with that, or they just think they're supposed to say it and then do what they want anyway? Like, how many of them are just lying on purpose, and how many of them are lying to themselves?
I'm probably some of both. I mean, but I feel like that's sort of the same in, the general world anyway, in any profession, there's always a mix of both. But I don't know. I mean, look at Hard Knocks this year with the Giants. There was that one scene at the Combine where Joe Shane is talking to his head of PR of, what he's going to tell reporters publicly, even though it's a flat out lie. They're kind of joking about it. And I'm like, well, we know it all happens. I'm kind of surprised they decided to blatantly advertise it on Hard Knocks. But yeah, they do it a lot. And sometimes I get it. You can't reveal everything, injuries. All of this is, it's a competitive advantage, whatnot. I think some teams, coaches, whatever, take it to an unnecessary degree, where, these aren't state secrets.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no, I agree. I always just wonder, though, like, I think that there are some coaches who are like, we're doing a great job, and they just don't know what a great job looks like, despite the fact that they're coaching at the NFL level. But that's a longer conversation for another day. Dose of reality here. I'll try to think of a happier note to end on. But we are like, the vibes are immaculate right now. Everyone's like, oh, this is great. Everyone's excited. You know, they haven't even put pads on yet, so everyone's still happy. We're like, oh, their messaging matches their substance, and everything is very, very positive. What are the areas that worry you when the rubber meets the road? Because I don't think anyone, well, all of us have been very positive. It's not like, oh, well, and they're going to win the Super Bowl. So where are the problem, potential, I'll call it problem areas, the things that are still huge questions for you, despite the fact that they're doing the right things as they get started?
Yeah. I mean, I think the uncertainty with the offensive line. What are they going to do at left tackle? And I mean, it's important in a year, but especially with a rookie quarterback. So that's a red flag for me. And then I just think, having so many new faces, I don't know that it's necessarily a concern, but it's definitely an unknown. I mean, I don't even know what this offense is going to look like right now. I don't think anybody outside the building knows what it's going to look like. Sure, we know some of the foundational things that Cliff Kingsbury likes to do, what he did in Arizona. We can, deduce from there, but, this is different personnel, different coaching staff, different ideas. So we don't know truly how it's going to look. And that alone is, you just don't know what to expect from this team. I've said this before, and I truly believe it, that this is a group that could be the 2023 Houston Texans and surprise everybody and make that massive leap. Or they could have another 4-13 season. You certainly don't want that. I would think they'd fare much better than that, but you just don't know.
Yeah.
You haven't seen this collection of players together. You don't fully know yet what the system will be. You don't know how they're going to respond to adversity. You don't know how the coaching staff is going to respond to it. So it's a total unknown. In some ways that can help them. But to kind of place expectations, you don't know. And usually when we don't know, I mean, that gives me anxiety and then I freak out and I think there's something wrong. But in this context, I think it's just, a wait and see type deal.
Yeah, the natural skepticism of a true journalist. All right, last thing, I thought of a happier note to end on, because we had two great interviews earlier in the week, and that tends to happen this time of year where you just get great stuff from guys because everyone's in a good mood. They're happy to be back. They haven't beaten up on each other that much yet. What's been your favorite conversation in training camp so far that you can share?
I feel like every conversation with John Ridgway is fantastic because he's hilarious. I feel like John Ridgway, if he weren't playing football, and maybe he does pursue this as a, second career when he's done playing, absolutely should be in WWE. I just think he's a character. So I grabbed him after a practice. It was day one, because I know, the dude is thin. I'm like, dude, you, lost half your body weight. He's like, yeah, I dropped 20 pounds or whatever. And we were talking about it. He just has these funny one-liners. Like, yeah, I mean, Action Bronson did this. I mean, he's a big dude. He lost a bunch of weight. So I'd let me try it. Okay. Sure. But he's like, yeah, no McDonald's, no Five Guys. I really like Italian food. Can't have that. I'm like, oh, man. So what do you do? He's like, just chicken or meat and then some vegetables, walking the trail. But it's the way he delivers just so matter of fact. I'm like, just honest. It was great. Yeah, he was a pretty funny interview. He always is. He's just honest.
That's good to know. We'll add John Ridgway to our list. I don't think he was on my initial list. We had a great time with Allegretti yesterday because he's apparently a huge sports radio nut.
Fun.
He was
he
great.
seems really fun. Yeah.
Also, there's got to be an in-depth feature. Maybe you stick 48 on it on his coin collection. We talked about it for 3-4 minutes, and it was really great. But there is some real in-depth reporting with coin experts and stuff for a Nick Allegretti feature of this season.
Oh yeah, I heard about his coin collection. I just wanted to do a big feature on him. He seems really entertaining.
He does. He was great. Nicki Jhabvala, everybody. Read her work in the Washington Post. Follow her on Twitter at Nicki Jhabvala for all of the latest from training camp, posting up the videos and the updates and everything on Twitter. Nikki, always appreciate you. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
All right, that is Nicki Jhabvala with us here on the Hoffman Show. We get back, a couple of quick thoughts on what Nicki had to say, and then Jamie Erdahl joins us at 5:30. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Thanks again to Nicki Jhabvala for joining us for Not My Beat. Again, just moments away from chatting with Good Morning Football host Jamie Erdahl as they get ready to launch on Monday, relaunch the show that has been on hiatus since the spring. So, Maddie, the Commanders are out at camp on Sunday. Fans are out there. Pads go on Monday. Are you going on Sunday to take in training camp? Are you a training camp guy?
I kind of wanted this year. I am not classically a training camp guy, and there's one major thing that is keeping me from saying absolutely I'll be there on Sunday, and that's my swimming pool that I go to has a giant crab feast Saturday night that is also a lot of drinks. So waking up in the morning for I'm so excited. It's
forget the camp. Tell me more about this.
So Overley Community Pool over in Arlington, every year they have a adults only night that you spend $60 or $40 to either get all you can eat crab and barbecue or just all you can eat barbecue. You bring your own drinks. They let the pool open It's a big old party. You get to turn on the speakers, play your music. Yeah, it's just 3-4 hours of fun at the pool with a lot of crustacean and barbecue.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's my Saturday night. So that makes waking up Sunday
that does
morning
make
for
a
the
9 a.m.
Commanders.
practice. Yeah, we got the note, the media advisory that's like, hey, parking's going to be a mess. Traffic is expected. Make sure you arrive early. So it's going to be jammed. I'm not going out there just because I live in the district and getting to Ashburn. I have other things to do on my Sunday than 2 hours of driving round trip that just murders my entire day.
Makes sense.
Especially this particular weekend because my parents are in town. I'm having brunch with my parents. But like I am bummed that I'm missing the first day of fans because it is gonna have some juice. Because I mean, it is weird. I do feel like there is a little bit of tempered expectations. I don't feel like it's as ravenous, even as it was last year. Like there was this like just injection of life after Snyder sold and Harris bought the team that changed the dynamic of camp last year. It was way open to fans. Everything was new. So there's just a lot going on. And this year it's kind of like, hey, look at these competent fellas practicing football. And it's like, well, that's not exciting. Where's the train wreck? What do we watch? And so I do wonder what the juice is like, because still the diehards are going to go. It's going to be fun. And then Monday they put on pads. And that's when all bets are off.
I'm interested to see how the rookies will react to having fans actually, and how the entire team will react to having fans, to having a little bit of the cheers and jeers and all of that, because that is a big part of also getting ready for game day, getting ready for the crowds and for the energy levels, and being able to feed off of the good energy levels and push away the booze and all that.
Do dumb stuff. Like I saw today in Texans camp, Derek Stingley like cheap shotted Dalton Schultz. And it like wasn't that bad, but it definitely was cheap. Like after a play, I don't know if Schultz said something. Schultz didn't react at all, which makes me think maybe he deserved a little bit of it. So I'm not going to assign blame either way to whatever. But like play goes dead, Stingley like goes after him. Schultz has got his back turned and he like punches him down to the ground. And you're just like, that's your teammate, bro. And that's one thing I have wondered about kind of this new Kumbaya Commanders, if you will, where the entire team is together a lot more, where they've got the split locker room and guys really know each other. I wonder as they start to compete more intensely, they start banging pads, like same, because it's inevitable, right? Like, I don't care if your left guard and your defensive tackle are becoming buddy-buddy like Allegretti and John Allen are. If they keep mashing up against each other, you're going to get sick of each other on the field. Even if they can laugh about it afterwards. But can you keep a healthy competition while also not having anything spill over? AKA, are we going to have a training camp fight? Inevitably, yes. But hopefully it's not as bad. Or, I also am curious, like, what the camaraderie does. Like, let's say John Allen and someone get into it at Jets camp. Like, is Allegretti running over from the other field to be like, that's my boy? Like, there's a lot of team dynamics that I'm still curious to see how it plays out. It's the fun of being 3 days in. We don't know anything yet. But plenty still to go. All right, when we get back here on the Hoffman Show, Jamie Erdahl from Good Morning Football. Joining us now is my old friend Jamie Erdahl. Jamie, we're officially old now. This is how it works. You're just my old friend now. Of course, the host of Good Morning Football, which returns July 29th and will air Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on NFL Network, live from LA. Jamie's actually in the studio right now in Los Angeles in the North. Jamie, I know you can't show us what is going on in the studio. It's top secret until Monday, July 29th. But what do you see as you guys get prepared to relaunch Good Morning Football?
What if I showed you just a little corner? Okay.
I mean, all right, here we go. I'll describe it for the event.
Wait, where's the
we have a YouTube audience and a root. Oh, that looks like the same colors. Looks like the same logo.
And the letters are the same.
It looks like Good Morning Football.
Yeah, I'm new to the LA building. I've been telling all the people here that I have not done a minute of television from the LA studio ever since coming to NFL Network. Everything we did for the show was in New York City. So I've been walking around preparing studiously for this interview and trying to find a place to do this recording. And I just went to the one room that I know, which is the studio where we're going to do GMFB from now in LA. And I walked in, the guy set me up, and, I'm beautifully backlit here, as you can appreciate. And it looks great. I mean, this is going to be truly, I know that's like the working joke is home away from home. I mean, I'm going to be in the studio 4 hours a day, Monday through Friday, starting Monday, July 29th. So I better like it in here. They better welcome me in because I see my chair, and it's really exciting. It'll be really
It is. And you guys have the overtime streams on the Roku channel Monday through Friday as well. That start at 10. So that's the 4 hours. Main Good Morning Football, if you will, 8 to 10 on NFL Network. Now, is this because Schrager just got too big that like New York City couldn't hold him anymore? Is this what happened here?
And there's also a really cool, there's like, again, you'll see all these bells and whistles, but you're kind of getting like an inside scoop right now. There's like this really cool door that might give us access to running around outside. Because if you remember in New York, we used to go down to the street and do outside segment. Now let's just say we have a little bit more easy access to the outside. I envision Kyle Brandt just being like, open that door, and then he's just going to take off, and like we'll never to be seen again. So yeah, Schrager, needed a little bit more wiggle room for his top 5 rookie of the week, and Angry Runs just kind of outgrew New York City. No,
I was going to say, how quickly does that door open, and like how sturdy is the hinge? Because if Kyle is told that he can run and Angry Runs, like there's 100% chance he tries to literally run down that door.
That's exactly right. I think they are. I mean, this is an honest comment. I think they are timing it to be able to tell him how long it takes to open the door because they know him. Okay. There's also stairs in this studio that like probably people are going to be running up and down. It's like a multi-level studio. It's really exciting. And the thing about GMFE Overtime is I think for as much as Good Morning Football is like down the avenue of the NFL for the first 2 hours, GMFB Overtime, because it's on Roku and because it'll be put into syndication, we're really going to branch out even more just into like broader, world topics, pop culture, whatnot, as it pertains, is because so much of last year we saw pop culture can braid into the NFL quite easily. GMFE Overtime is going to really have like that talk show feel. So we need a lot of wiggle room to play.
Yeah. And so the answer, that was a joking question, but the answer is actually kind of yes, as you guys did outgrow the space.
We did. And, this space was here. It was at the, NFL LA offices, and the network built this studio a few years back. And there's multiple stages here. And it was, nothing was being used. And so they really just honed in on their resources and like, how can we have a great show like GMFB and in these beautiful stages and like kind of not have them operating together. So it was a hard decision. It was certainly shocking, I think, for a lot of us to hear in March that this was transpiring this way. But now that it has happened and I got my family to Los Angeles, I'm really excited. I'm gonna, because I had a baby a couple months ago. So like I haven't really been paying a lot of attention to anything except for like getting the show back on the air. And now that I see it and I'm sitting here and I'm looking at the table, I'm really excited to get rolling again.
Jamie Erdahl, Good Morning Football with us here on the Hoffman Show. So let's go into it a little bit because it was, I think, shocking. Not just obviously it's the most shocking for you, and it matters the most for you as the person doing the show. But I think for a lot of us watching, it was like, whoa, like this is Good Morning Football has been the staple now for a number of years. You obviously took it over a couple years ago in the host chair, and now it's going to move from New York City, which is kind of the host, especially for Eastern time. And I do actually think back to our conversation when you took over the show of like, okay, this is what it's going to be like. Like Kay told me, obviously you took over for Kay Adams, and Kay told me like your alarm's going to go off at this time, and you got to, you're just kind of dragging yourself to the studio, waking up along the way. And now you're doing a show at 8 a.m. Eastern from Los Angeles. So as they're telling you, hey, this is the idea, what is the back and forth like of you considering it first in your own head, then I'm sure you talk to your husband and your family about it, and then ultimately, obviously, with all of your bosses, that you decide, okay, I'm in. Let's go do this in LA.
A couple things. I figured, there's no better time to sign up for a 5 a.m. show than when you have a newborn, because your sleep is just kind of crap anyways. So this first year, I'm kind of unbothered by it. I would be totally honest. Like it was, if any time to ease into something like this, it would be now. It was exactly how you explained it. We found out. My whole thing is, and I know this will resonate with you, I just love my chair so much, and I love the show, and I was pretty much going to do anything to stay on in my chair and wherever that chair may sit. And so my husband and I landed pretty quickly on, this was the best move for us, and whatever the decision makers and the reasons why, that's the NFL's job, not my job to explain the why, even though it's fairly obvious. I think in this world of linear television, hard decisions are being made at every network.
Sure.
But for us personally, I love being in the studio. I love the business of the NFL. I do love doing sideline, and the network lets me still do the international games. So I do get a touch of that, but I just really love hosting right now. And it was just like what we had to do as a family unit to kind of keep ensuring that was going to maintain. So we picked pretty quickly to up and move, had our baby at the end of the month of March. And then pretty much, April, May, and June was spent like logistics, getting everybody here, finding a place to live. And we've been here about a month now, and we're just thrilled with the sunshine and the ocean and the commute. And I think once football goes, it's funny, we have like a nanny. And I said to our nanny, like, you'll be amazed at our family. We just get zipped up during football season. Like the NFL season, it's like it's like the machine that makes our family go. And it just continues to come back to like, I'm just so excited to get started. Training camp, like I'm just chomping at the bit.
Yeah, I think we all are.
Yeah.
Did you talk to Peter and Kyle at all about like, because you guys all had to make your own decisions based off your own families and everything, but I'm sure part of the reason you want to keep the chair is you like working with those guys.
Love working with those.
What were those conversations like between the three of you?
It was just about keeping the integrity of the show that we love so much, and that, as to your point, that fans have really fallen in love with over the years. And no matter who made what decision, how do we move forward with keeping GMFB intact in a capacity that works both for us personally and then also for the brand? So Peter and Kyle are going to do the coast to coast thing. Peter comes out here for Fox, and so you'll see him on Sunday morning. So that was kind of like an easy bleed over to being on the show in studio. And then they will have a like very little delay set up in New York City where they'll be together when they're not here in LA. And I was saying to somebody yesterday that of anybody to not be with me every day, it's going to be fine that it's those two, because I just know them really well and I can read them, to get them to places. I'm just meeting and like getting to know and working with Akbar for the first time because Jason McCourty isn't going to be in that chair. And so I'm glad that he's with me in person, because that's going to really be the 4-hour relationship that has to blossom. And then I think, the big specialty events, whether it be, week 1 kickoff, international games, Super Bowl, that's when you'll see us all together and, really putting bows on some of the NFL's like landmark events.
I'm so curious because you guys set the conversation in so many ways for a lot of the NFL stuff. Like you're the show that's on in all the cafeterias and the, like I'm watching Hard Knocks the other day, and like y'all are on and the NFL Network is on in Joe Shane's office, and you're like, that's both cool and terrifying.
Yes, totally.
And I think about that responsibility a lot here in DC of like, I host an afternoon drive show. Like what I say is going to help shape the conversation. So when you guys talk about any particular topic, I'm curious your approach, because also from a national perspective, you want to do right by like the local people who are covering it and like have all that detail. You have that responsibility, but it's hard to do that for all 32 teams. So as you guys talk about the big news of the day, what's kind of your process with the show of setting up the NFL's conversation for the day and the week by week?
That's a big compliment that you're paying us to say that we set the table. So thank you for that.
Thank Joe Shane.
Joe Shane, exactly. I really look at Peter Schrager. I continuously call him the editorial North Star of our show. I think he is one of the most tapped in, clued in person that I've ever been around in any professional sport. And so we really look at him to help guide those conversations because of all the people that he stays in touch with. He knows, like, he's almost like a day ahead of like what's gonna really be like the ripple effect stuff. So, we pretty much have 32 bosses that we're trying to answer to as well. And so, to your point, sometimes is it a strain to make sure we are including some teams that haven't been a part of the conversation for a beat, but we do have an obligation to everybody to make sure that, we are not, essentially no stone is unturned. 4 hours on a TV show allows you to do that you have wiggle room and time to bring everybody into the conversation. But we do, I like to call it like a split shift. Like we do the show in the morning, and then at night there's like a big kind of like brain trust that exists, and everyone gets involved on like a shared document, and we send ideas back and forth, and someone kind of tees up a conversation. No, we don't. We think it should go this direction, and let's say something happens with Patrick Mahomes, like, you're going to talk about him for 4 hours, but how do you reshape that conversation for 4 hours to make it different because you want it to be fresh and new? So it is collaborative. We were able to bring some of the production, staff and decision makers with us when we made the move, which I think is vital to keeping the integrity of Good Morning Football intact.
One name that's also going to be on the show is Sherry Burris, who a lot of our audience knows here, of course, in DC, as she worked for NBC4 before joining NFL Network. Besides not running, because that is definitely not something that Sherry does, as everyone else is going to be apparently running around that studio. Sherry would be the first one to admit that, just so we're clear. What's Sherry's role on the show going to be, since you're stealing us from her in DC?
She will the newsreader role, if you will, and then she did when I will be called away to, like I said, do international games, sideline, whatever. I believe she'll be one of the names that will fill in on the host chair. So it was really important, I think, for the show to have somebody like Sherry who can really do it all. But with her background as a reporter, like a classically trained like news reporter, it was great when we found out that we could have that person in studio. Because if you remember previously, Will Selva was, not in studio with us. I think it's going to be really fun to not only allow her the space and the time to provide us and like reset the news sometimes. Cause us, we can get a little outside the box, and it's good to have that person bring us back in. But also, sometimes it can be a 5-person conversation. And I think that's important to allow her that growth and that space to be able to do that. And then, you'll see her fill in as a host sometimes.
I don't know. The Sherry I know, thinking that she's the one who's got to get the conversation back on track is terrifying.
You just know we're just chit-chatting, at training camp or something. When she's given an assignment, she resets the direction.
She is a pro's pro. That is also the Sherry I know. But
yeah,
Sherry does love it. She will help in the sidetrack and help you get back on track, which is that's kind of the perfect fifth person.
Yes.
For all of you. When you think of the big stories that you'll be covering this year, you have the Chiefs going after a 3-peat. You have a lot of the major players, like who knows what's happening with Ayuk in San Francisco right now. A lot of changes in Baltimore. Some of the best teams from last year have some big questions to be answered. Like what as you prepare for this season, as you kind of get out of like, oh my God, I'm caring for this infant 24/7 to like, oh right, I have to host a football show. What are some of the big stories that you've started to look at and that you think will be the ones that you're talking about for the next 4 months?
So you rattled off a couple of them. I think we have a lot of unanswered questions when it comes to Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. That honestly, both on and off the field, will be interesting to watch transpire as events across the country unfold this fall. Reading between the lines of an election year.
Yeah.
And so that intrigues me. Teams that I feel like it just makes me want to pull my hair out because I can't figure out what is going on with them, i.e. the Dallas Cowboys and the Chicago Bears. Like, we want so badly for those markets to give us this spark and this answer and something to talk about. And finally, is this going to be the year that in January we're not crafting a show on January 16th about how the Cowboys fell flat once again in early January? Are we having a conversation in early November about like where did the draft pick go wrong for the Bears? Or is it finally going to be different, for those two markets in particular? I look just down the street at Chargers Commons, which is a beautiful facility that just opened. And the fact that we have the double Harbaugh experience happening in the NFL again, what that looks like. I was talking to Tom Pelissero yesterday, actually, and he tried to sell me on the fact that like the Chargers are going to be the biggest story no matter what happens this fall at some point, because if it goes great, then they're the biggest story because they're beating the Chiefs. If it's not going great, then why did you bring him here? And who is going to get Justin Herbert to a place where he's playing, to his level that he can? So those are just a couple that are in the Chiefs and the 49ers. Yeah. I mean, it does feel like there is repeat in terms of the upper echelon, but I do think there could be kind of like a mixture of the pot here and like those second and third tier teams.
Yeah, I think that, I think a lot of people will probably roll their eyes when you're like, oh, Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. It's like, oh, we're so tired. But like the reason that we cared about them last year is because we thought they were going to be good. And then Rodgers goes down on the fourth snap of the season and they're terrible. And that's the league sometimes.
They were terrible at the quarterback position. I don't think they were that bad.
That's fair.
Their capacities. And so that's why it's like, well, wait a second. If they can just turn the page and get competency at that position, which I feel like so many teams just seek is competency at the quarterback position, then what do we have here? And that division, now it's shifted where it's ripe for competition.
No, I think that's a great point too, because their defense is so nasty.
Yeah.
And obviously Salah's so good as a coach on that end of it. So I think we're all sick of the Jets. I think the Jets fans are the sickest of the Jets, but they're actually genuinely interesting. So that makes sense. Here in DC is Jamie Erdahl, by the way, if you don't recognize the voice, is our guest here on the Hoffman Show. Good Morning Football returning July 29th live from LA on NFL Network. And then Good Morning Football Overtime on the Roku channel starting at 10 a.m. Here in DC, obviously, everything's Dan Quinn adjacent. We all want to see, Dan Quinn and Jaden Daniels both. Mm-hmm. But when you think about DQ and what he was in Dallas the last couple of years, coordinating one of the best defenses in the league, you do mention, of course, they fall flat in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people look at what happened defensively in that game, especially the one against Green Bay, and they're like, yikes. What do you make of the hire and kind of where Washington is now entering year 2 of the Josh Harris era with DQ at the helm?
I love Dan Quinn. I got to know him primarily when he was with the Falcons, and that's when I was on the NFL sideline at CBS. And then when he was relieved from Atlanta and goes to Dallas is when I flipped over to the SEC. So my last like true Dan Quinn as a coach experience is when he was in Atlanta. And no matter what transpired there, what I was always impressed by was his presence and availability as a human and a man to the athletes in the building. He just is approachable. He's bright. He has high emotional intelligence. And he went to Dallas and I think honed maybe his defensive craft even more with really talented guys. And so you kind of hope this like reiteration of him being a head coach in a new place, maybe he's a made man in terms of what he can bring to the table from his head coaching experience, what he had in Dallas defensively, and then what he's going to bring to Washington. I'm a Dan Quinn fan, and in the head coaching, when it comes to Ron Rivera to Dan Quinn, like I love the personalities that are there. It's just how do you get the talent to deliver on the field within a very challenging division that the Commanders sit in? And then back to that quarterback competency conversation. You guys just haven't had it, and that's infuriating, I'm sure, from a local conversation perspective. Now, I didn't cover Jaden Daniels when he was at LSU. I had departed from the SEC by then, but I know the demands, and I knew the quarterback that preceded him and Joe Burrow a couple of years. That's when I was on the SEC on CBS. And the expectation, I think, that Joe Burrow set from a quarterback perspective in a school and a program that has such high demands from a defensive and a secondary position. Now Joe Burrow comes in and says, like, LSU, you can have quarterback play. You can have elite quarterback play. This is what it looks like. Then Jaden Daniels comes in and is off the charts and redefines himself, not only at the college level, but from a prospect perspective. I think Washington, you guys will be just really happy with the maturity and the development of what Jaden Daniels brings to the table, only because I know what is expected now in Baton Rouge from that position.
Yeah, I mean, we heard all the stories. I think we knew that he was obviously pretty darn good. I think a lot of us in the media here and certainly fans trust Adam Peters as the GM to select the right guy. You get out there in the spring and you watch Jaden just operate, and you're like, oh, like it's even better than we thought right now. Nevertheless, what we think it could be. So I think that some of the words you use, like maturity, like we hear stories, but then it's, oh, he's in the building at 5:45 every day and all the things. And then you see it on the field, and it's just different.
You know what's so funny about that is in my couple of years on, I'm not going to name names because it's no point in doing it, but in my couple of years on the NFL sideline, I was around rookie quarterbacks, you know, in various, you know, first starts, or this is their third start. And I was paired with Trent Green, and Trent, obviously a long-time career, just a really mature, team-oriented guy. And it was always so interesting to me when you would hear these stories of young quarterbacks not being the first one in the building, or not spending extra time with guys. And Trent would leave and just be like, it's just so easy. Why don't they do it? Like, just be in the building, show up, and you will be one of the guys, and you can set the direction. However, and to him, it was such an obvious, it was such a layup. And the stars would opt to not engage in that behavior. And he'd be like, why? And then, so I'm so glad to hear stories like that when a Jaden Daniels or you know, any of these guys get drafted, and you're like, that they're doing it the right way. And that's what you want.
For sure. The other fun story, if you haven't heard of this one yet, is Luke McCaffrey, of course, Christian's brother, Commanders' third round pick.
Yep.
Asked Jay, like, he heard that Jaden was showing up early, and he asks Daniels, like, what time are you getting to the building? And Jaden goes 5:45, and Luke goes, okay, cool. Next day he shows up, and he's showed up every day ever since. And it's like, those are the exact type of traits of why Adam Peters drafted these guys. Like, they're a very intentional personality trait type of things that they're looking for, and they hit home run after home run on that department. Of course, TBD on whether they can actually play NFL football. That's the hard part, and we'll see it. And one guy you did, and I did want to ask you about, that you covered when he was at Alabama, is Brian Robinson Jr. I think he could have a monster year. His running style is very similar to James Conner. He had a really, really great year under Cliff in Cliff's final year in Arizona. What do you know? Like, when I say Brian Robinson to you as a guy that you covered quite a bit at Alabama, what comes to mind? And especially the year he's had after getting shot a couple of years ago, and that whole comeback story. Last year, fully healthy for most of the year, or coming into the year at least healthy, not having to fight back from what he went through in training camp 2 years ago. What's kind of your Brian Robinson outlook for 2024?
Brian Robinson, to me, when I was around him in Tuscaloosa, he's got fortitude. He just hangs around, and he gets his touches, and he gets his yards, and he does it with such steadfast dedication to the position and his running style. For example, you think about those Alabama teams from like 18 to 21. He was there for 4 years, and he just waited behind Najee, behind Damian Harris, behind these running backs that just would come in, play, get the touches, and B-Rob just like sat there and watched and waited. And like, the Tuscaloosa native, like, it was a dream for him to go, and he wasn't getting his playing time. And then his senior year, he just takes off. So he spends a lot of time at school. So he comes to the league a little bit older, I think has an immense amount of maturity. I really give the Commanders a lot of credit. I think whoever over the last couple of years wanted to really increase the meter of maturity has done so with the players, at least that I know in the building. But Brian Robinson, I agree with you. I think his running style, it fits for how the game has shifted a little bit in terms of like the James Conner types, the bowling balls, if you will, and like the way they can break through. I just am so happy when things were starting to go well for Brian Robinson, and then for that crazy, like anomaly, tragic situation to happen before training camp. And then for him to come back from that is just like classic what I learned from him or saw of him in Tuscaloosa. And I couldn't be happier for him, for hopefully the role he'll take on within this offense.
Hopefully many angry runs. That is definitely his
Yes,
style.
exactly.
B-Rob, get yourself on Good
Get a
Morning
scepter.
Football because it's back July 29th. That is what we call a transition, boys and girls.
Yes.
July 29th, 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 a.m. every single day on NFL Network. And then Good Morning Football Overtime streams on the Roku channel Monday through Friday at 10. Jamie Erdahl in the host chair. It is always great to chat, my friend. Thank you so much for your time and for all the insight on how this all went down and the football. And
Yes.
good luck.
Thank you. I know, old friend. We are old and we're old friends. That's
Yes.
Now it's like the double qualifier.
Hey, I'll keep the friend. There's nothing we can do about the old, so
Nope.
It is what it is. Thanks, Jamie.
Yep.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.
It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Logan Paulson's thoughts on the QBs in camp so far coming up at 6:30. But right now, it is time for the final installment of our Pick 6 positional group previews. And today, we're talking quarterbacks.
The 6 biggest Commander storylines.
It is caught!
Delivered at 6 o'clock sharp. It's the Pick 6 at 6.
We set out to find a leader, someone who could take this franchise to the next level, build an elite team that consistently competes for championships.
All right, we've done this for every single group on the team that excludes the specialist. I'm so sorry to Tress and to Tyler Ott and whoever winds up kicking for this team, but I don't know that there's 6 questions worth of stuff there. But we salute you in your specialtiness. Number 1 is going to be the same question we've asked every single time. In fact, every single question is the same. It's nice and organized. So let's get to it. Who are the dudes that we're talking about here? Number one is Jayden Daniels, who you know about, Marcus Mariota, Jeff Driscoll, Sam Hartman. And I'm actually going to take the time to break these guys down a little bit because, while Daniels is the one that matters the most this year, in fact, we named him the most important commander in 2024 in a very, very bold decision by the Hoffman Show. The quarterback, who's the number 2 pick, is the most important guy for the season? No way. The role that these other guys play, I think, is actually kind of interesting. So let's talk about it beyond Daniels. Daniels is the obvious, he's going to be the starter. How he plays will determine how the team goes. That's how it works. Marcus Mariota, I think it's unfortunate that he seems to be really struggling so far in training camp because I do think he's got talent. And there is something that Dan said today that I thought was interesting, or Dan said, I think it was Friday. Yeah, whatever. I don't know what day it is anymore. Well, Dan Quinn said where he talks about, this is training camp. We're not installing. So there's certain plays that are better for Jayden, certain plays that are better than Marcus. And there's kind of this acknowledgement that if Mariota were to play during the season, maybe some of the offense would look a little different than some of the stuff that he's struggling with right now. And there's going to be plays where Jayden struggles, and maybe they wouldn't run those for Jayden during the season. But Marcus Mariota, if we're being honest, wasn't brought here to play. Marcus Mariota was brought here because as they kind of went around the room and they talked to all the offensive coaches and the defensive coaches, and they were like, who are some of the guys that you really liked coaching that you think can help build the culture here? It's very clear that Brian Johnson, the pass game coordinator, went, yeah, Marcus was incredible for Jalen last year in Philadelphia. We should bring him here for whether it was going to be Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jayden Daniels, J.J. McCarthy, whoever they drafted with that number 2 pick. Ultimately, very quickly, Adam Peters was like, yep, it's going to be Daniels. But they whether it was going to be Daniels when the process ended or not, they liked Mariota in this mentor role. Mariota is a guy who helps connect the locker room. And as I was talking to, I think it was Allegretti yesterday, but it might have been Juice the day before, the 2 interviews that we did on the first 2 days of camp, Marcus's name came up as one of the guys with Bobby Wagner and Zach Ertz and those veterans that is connecting this locker room. So it's not about, yes, if Marcus Mariota has to play as the backup quarterback, then we're going to have some issues potentially with the fact that Marcus Mariota is the backup quarterback. But in the old, Howard Mudd, why don't you give Peyton Manning's backup any reps? Well, because if Peyton gets hurt, we're screwed, and we don't practice screwed. You were always going to be a bit screwed no matter which veteran you signed as your backup because you want the rookie to come in, win the job, and play well. So how do you support that rookie? The answer was Marcus Mariota. And Dan Quinn talked about that on Friday and that very specific exact thing and the role that Marcus is playing.
The thing I've gotten to know Marcus, coached against him for a lot. You don't know when you coach against somebody what the man's like. And so he has got just a absolute presence about him. Teammates, they're drawn to him. This quarterback room really has the makings of something very special, very unique in different ways. Jayden's spoken about it. Marcus has spoken about it. Tavita has. Cliff has. So their connection together, you feel that. You hear that from them. But The fun part about coaching, or one of the fun parts, is finding the specific things that people do well. And so when you're in a training camp setting like now, you're installing plays not always specific to a player. And so if you were just to put a line in, these might be the 10 or 15 concepts that Marcus does best. This might be the 10 or 15 that Jaden does best. These are the same with Jeff. And so that's how you would do a game plan. That's different than a training camp install. And so learning what guys do as you're going through practices, man, that's a good play for him. That's what the fun of putting the big puzzle is together. But I didn't know the leader. You had heard so many things from him or something about him that he was good. I spent a lot of my off season in Hawaii, and I see people, tell Marcus I said hello. I said, I didn't know you know him. He said, I don't. But that's how they feel about him back home as well. And so I thought, what a great line for that. Hey, tell Marcus hello. No, I didn't know you know. I went to a camp one time. He was there. And so the connection that he has away from the game with his teammates is really strong too.
And that's what you're looking for out of Marcus Mariota. You're looking for a guy who is going to connect the team top to bottom, a guy who can be a resource even if he is not the world's greatest executor. And look, I would love if Marcus Mariota got the chance to play, if he proved all of us who were crushing him wrong. Or really, because it's not even that we're crushing him, right? It's we're looking at what we see on the field, and what we see on the field isn't good. Like, he dirted a couple balls today in training camp, and it's the reality that he hasn't been crushing it. He did not have a productive spring as a player. But his value to this team, if this team is at its best, is not going to be as a active on the field in between the white lines football player. And he is critically important to the room, critically important to Jaden's success. And I think this is something that is true with young quarterbacks all across the league. Who are your vets? And young players across the league, across sports. Who are your vets? Who are the guys that set you up with the know-how? And Marcus Mariota seems to be doing that. Which brings us to the third guy in the room, and that's Jeff Driscoll, who I actually don't know isn't better than Marcus Mariota as a football player. Marcus is a former number 2 overall pick who's played a lot of snaps in this league, and thus he has a level of experience and know-how and been there, done that, and he's been through some stuff off the field being a second pick that it didn't pan out for. That a guy like Driscoll, later round pick, he actually was converted to tight end, I think, at one point, back at quarterback. Never really was a highly touted guy coming out of Florida, but has started a game in, I think, every season that he's been in the league. Like, he just doesn't have that experience that Mariota has as an NFL player, but he might be better as an actual quarterback, or if not, they're close. And I would say so far through the spring and the first couple of training camp practices, Driscoll and Mariota are closer than Mariota and Daniels. So that backup quarterback spot, I don't think, because of all the intangible stuff that I just spent maybe even too much time talking about with Marcus about, I don't know that it's actually in play. But if we're doing it based purely on performance, I think it is. And it's the kind of thing where if, God forbid, something happens to Daniels and Mariota starts not playing well, like, would they go to Driscoll? Maybe. I think that's interesting. And last but not least, I'll just mention Sam Hartman, who is, of course, interesting. Priority UDFA. Gave him a little bit of extra money. They targeted him. And I think, like, in some ways, he's the future Mariota. Not that he's going to ever have the experience to be Jaden's partner, and be like, hey, buddy, when I was a starter 5 years ago, because Jaden and Sam are the same age, but they have a great relationship. They work out together. Sam takes everything really seriously. You watch him in practice. He's behind, like, he doesn't get reps. He actually got some today for the first time in team drills. But the first 2 practices, he didn't even get reps. And because of that, he's taking exactly what he's supposed to do, taking his own reps. He's behind the play, like, mentally in it, with a towel in his hand, and throwing the towel, not throwing in the towel, throwing the towel, if you will, which is something that quarterbacks do to kind of simulate the weight of the football in their hand, and processing the play, taking those mental reps. And he looks like a batter who's hitting from the batter's box, or from the on deck circle. And that's kind of what he's doing, timing up, trying to do the best he can to be in it, knowing he's not going to actually be in it. But I think what you have in Hartman is a really smart guy who's a great teammate, And there are, guys across the league who maybe turn into, after 12 years, ESPN NFL analysts like Dan Orlovsky. Dan Orlovsky wasn't a great player in the NFL. He's one of the best players in the history of UConn football, but okay, that's UConn football. And Hartman was a pretty solid, Notre Dame's got a better history than UConn, but, pretty solid. He was a solid college quarterback. But is he going to be able to do it in the NFL? No. Could he be valuable and have a decade-plus career in the league because he's really smart and he's the kind of guy you want in a meeting room, someone who might see something on tape or be able to explain something in a different way that still has the touch of a player but maybe the knowledge level of a coach? Yes. And so that, I think, is the hope for Sam Hartman as he develops into a solid backup. He's not killing it when he's out there in the drills. He misses throws at a higher rate than the other three guys. It's pretty clear he's the fourth guy, but that doesn't mean he can't make the practice squad and then wind up carving out some kind of career for himself, even if it looks like a guy we're going to talk about more in number 2. So let's get to it. Who are the coaches at play for this quarterback group?
Number 2
starts with Cliff, former quarterback himself, known for being a bit of a quarterback whisperer, a guy who has had great success with a lot of different styles of quarterback. And, of course, in the NFL, he and Kyler really worked well together. And I think people need to take the reputation that Cliff had, 2, the way it ended in Arizona, and separate it from the reality of what it was, which was 3 pretty darn good offensive years and then a disastrous injury year that ultimately leads to, I think it was a 4-12 record and Cliff getting fired. But, the Cardinals were pretty good record-wise even. They made the playoffs. They had struggles late in the year and got blown out in playoff games. And, I'm not telling you that Cliff was actually an awesome head coach who got screwed in Arizona. Although I will say it was interesting. When we talked to Zach Ertz on Take Command, before camp started, he was not happy with how things ended for Cliff in Arizona. So I think a lot of the players really liked Cliff, which tells you something. Certainly Zach Ertz, who's been around a time or two, in this league, he's a big fan of Cliff. So that is what it is. But the point is, Cliff did succeed offensively. And I think he would also look back and be like, I can do a lot better. That some of the areas where we ultimately did fail in Arizona, I know and have identified some of those things, and we're going to find out. But the other big, coaching influences here, I think, are what's most interesting about this staff when it comes to the offense, when it comes to the quarterback. There are so many different thought processes in the room. And we're not going to talk a ton about Anthony Lynn here, but him coming in as a different stylistic guy with the run game stuff and how that matches with the pass game, that's interesting. Obviously, Brian Johnson is a huge influence here. Former quarterback himself, been Jalen Hurts' guy in Philly, was a bit of a scapegoat by what everyone says last year. Really Sirianni tried to put his prints on things after Shane Steichen left, and it did not go well, and Brian Johnson wound up getting fired for it. But a lot of people around the league still really believe in Brian Johnson, think that he was a huge part of the success of Jalen 2 years ago in the MVP caliber season, and what he brings in terms of quarterback run knowledge, what he brings in terms of vertical passing game, some of the stuff that Philly's been really good with Hurts in, does mesh really well with Cliff, and how that comes together is fascinating. Obviously, Tavita Pritchard, brought in by Eric Bieniemy last year and held on to. He comes from a West Coast offense background. What does he bring to the room? What does he bring to the coaching style? What does he bring in terms of the relationships? How does he meld with all these guys? They seem to be getting along great. It seems that they have a great room. And then the last guy is kind of the Sam Hartman whisperer. His job is in part to develop Sam Hartman, but he brings kind of this bridge because he was an active player last year. His assistant quarterbacks coach, David Blau, who was under Cliff in Arizona, was with Jared Goff last year in Detroit, and is just known as this wizard-like super brain guy who is now learning how to coach. And Dan Quinn was actually asked about Blau's progress and his role within the staff.
Yeah, and all of these are new for him as well as he's going through it. And so he's also really involved, with Sam in that development plan too. So knowing this is what we're going to do this month, and we laid out everything that looks like for Sam to go. But much like you do with a player, we're not just developing players. We're developing coaches too, and we're not going to miss one step with a guy like Dave or William Gay or Sharif or Ryan Kerrigan that are ready to take these moves together, because the good part about something like that, one of the good parts, is they've seen the game through the lens of the helmet. And so for a guy at quarterback who's done that and seen that, he also knows what development looks like. He knows what starting looks like, what being a backup looks like, the good and the hard with that. And so he's got this unique perspective that I want him to be able to share with those guys, because it's not one size fits all. So he's off to a great start with us.
I love that in general, away from the quarterback stuff, is Dan realizes like you have to develop coaches. And I will forever remember asking Ron last year in the spring, basically, hey man, you delegate a lot. What is it that you're doing now? And that's the short version of the question. I asked it very nicely. And Ron was like, well, that's actually a great question. And one of the things that he tried to answer with was, well, I'm coaching coaches. I'm trying to develop coaches more this year. And didn't go great. I think that's something that a head coach maybe should have been worried about earlier in his tenure. And also probably if he was more effective. Anyway, we don't need to beat up on Rivera. Point is, I think Quinn understands that development. And I actually think that is one of the big lessons that he took out of what happened to him in Atlanta. Was, as everybody knows, they lost the Super Bowl 28-3. Kyle Shanahan left, and then things didn't go great. So let's say they hopefully have a lot of success here. Hopefully they don't lose a Super Bowl after being up 28-3. But whatever level of success they have here, Cliff gets poached and Cliff's ready to go try being a head coach again. Do they have the next guy ready? Do they have systems in place to ensure continuity if things are going well, especially with a young quarterback that would be playing extremely well if all of a sudden his offensive coordinator is getting poached? So I think that's a great like overarching thing for DQ to know, and that if they're good defensively, like there will be guys that get poached off this staff to go be coordinators somewhere else, and to have the next guys in line and coach the coaches, I think is great. And of course, that communication within a coaching staff makes you better coaches to the players, which brings us back to them hopefully being successful with Jayden Daniels. Speaking of Jayden Daniels,
number 3.
Who's the best player in the room? That answer is number 5. Jayden Daniels is already the best guy in the room. Jayden Daniels will only get better. I don't really know what more there is to say. He's got good touch, good accuracy, good feet, good feel. The question is, how consistently can he use those things effectively at the NFL level? TBD, starting in the preseason, and then off to the regular season we go. Number 4. Hey, that's what I said. Number 4 is who's the wild card in the room. I will say it's Mariota because, like, obviously he's the backup, and I don't know how much any of these other guys are going to matter to the 2024 season. Hopefully not. I know Driscoll's got the weird stat that he started a game every year. Hopefully that's not ominous. But, yeah, I mean, if Mariota has to play, then how he plays is a huge determining factor. And if, things go super south and he's playing a lot, that's not great. If all of a sudden he comes in and plays really well and keeps the season afloat, for Daniels to ultimately come back, like, great. It's Daniels' job. Mariota's there to fill in if he has to, and in that way, the unique nature of quarterback makes this question a lot harder to answer than some of the other groups where there's been guys who have the wild swing potential because there's multiple players at each position. Really, the wild card is Daniels, if we're being honest, because he's a rookie. And does he play like a rookie, or does he play like a vet? And actually, they're good this year. So really, the answer is Jayden Daniels again. All right, number 5.
Number 5.
Number 5 is a question that I don't know. Our last wild card question, and we're going super wild card on this one because Anthony Haney is not here. Matty Essig, you get to ask the quarterback question. What is your, Craig doesn't know it yet, but he's got to answer it, question about the quarterback position.
So one of the important things that we've seen in this training camp is that despite the fact you correct, Marcus Mariota has not been great. He's been taking a majority of the first team snaps. And we've also heard from Adam Peters, from Dan Quinn, that they will start him when he's ready, not before, when he's ready. My question for you, given that the only chance he's not starting is there is a catastrophic accident that happens, when do you think Jayden Daniels is starting?
By the joint practices. I really don't think it'll take that long. Keim has a funny way of saying this, which is it is Jayden versus Daniels. It is not Jayden versus Marcus. It's not Daniels versus Mariota. It is Jayden versus Daniels. And in that way, like it's just another way of saying what Peters and Quinn said that you referenced, which is when he's ready, they'll name him. The thing is, he's already the best quarterback on the roster. And while, yes, Marcus is getting some of the number 1 snaps, and he seems to be getting the first rounds of number one snaps. They are mixing and matching personnel so much that it's not true number one snaps, right? Daniels is getting reps with Dotson and with McLaurin, and some reps, some periods, it's behind the number one O-line. And then occasionally, maybe he's with the two line, but the one receivers. There was a 2-minute drill on Thursday, the second day of practice, where it's mostly twos, but Zach Ertz was out there in the 2-minute drill, catching passes, doing work with JD5. So I think they're mixing and matching enough that they're not really putting themselves behind. And in fact, they're doing the kind of cross-training that's good for developing multiple relationships in case different guys have to play, whether Marcus has to play as a backup or whether, Terry misses a game and, wide receiver 4 has to all of a sudden be the starter. You want some sense of rhythm, some sense of timing, some sense of all that with all these different guys. But realistically, there's going to get to a point 2 weeks or so into camp, after the first preseason game, maybe by the second preseason game, the joint practices and all that, where you want to stop doing we're still evaluating, and you want to just hardcore get ready for the season. And also some of that is pushed by the deadlines of how much you play guys in preseason games, because if Daniels is the starter, then maybe he plays a half in the second preseason game and doesn't play the third. If he's not the starter yet, is he playing in the third preseason game? How do you get enough snaps for Driscoll and Hartman if you have a development plan for them? There's a lot of multi-factors that go into that. And so I think that all that stuff goes into it. But I think by the time we get to the joint practices, it'll be pretty clear that Jaden Daniels is the if not the named starter, they're going to be acting like he's the starter. But good question. Last but not least,
number 6.
Who makes the team? I came into this spring thinking they'd keep 3 because that's what most teams do now, and you have the third whatever on game day. I don't know that they're going to do that because I don't think they can. I do think a guy like Driscoll might be a little hard to get to practice squad, even as a veteran. Is there another team that signs him as a backup? Is he always going to be at risk of being poached? Yes. Hartman, very easy to get to practice squad. No one is signing Sam Hartman to their active roster. I would think anyway. I mean, I guess someone could be like, we love that dude as a developmental project. We'll put him on our 53 as a inactive quarterback every week, but that would be a stupid use of a roster spot. So because there's so many guys at other positions, though, I think that they can only stand to carry 2. You need that roster spot. So I'm going to say Daniels and Mariota. They make the team. Driscoll hopefully can get to practice squad and is around. Hartman practice squad and is around. And that's the room. The veteran practice squad stuff is really helpful now. I don't want to give up Driscoll if I can. I like having him around as another option if all of a sudden something happens and you need a backup quarterback to play. Again, especially with how they've played. But I think to go back to where I started and where I spent a lot of time in this segment is to not just repeat the same stuff about Jaden Daniels and what he does well and all the same stuff we're going to be talking about ad nauseum. The value of Mariota, the dude in the room, the experience, all that kind of stuff as a mentor to Jaden is why he's going to probably stay above Driscoll. And so I think those two make the roster. How have they done so far through a slightly more nuanced lens? Talk about that next. Logan Paulson and I talk quarterbacks. Take command to wrap up the show in the final half hour here on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, and of course streaming on YouTube as well at the Team 980. And it's been a quarterback-heavy day. We revealed at 4:30 that Jayden Daniels, in a shocking announcement, was our most important commander of the 2024 season. We did our quarterback group preview, so I figured why not, as we wrap up the show here in our final half hour of the week, let you in on what Logan Paulson and I have seen for the first couple days of camp from Jayden Daniels and Marcus Mariota, with a little snippet of our Take Command review. Onward we go. All right. Quarterbacks, how they look so far. I definitely have a couple notes in my handy-dandy notebook that if people are watching on YouTube and see me looking down, it's because I actually have real notes. I'm a reporter, Logan. No, I'm not. I'm a talk show guy. Somewhere down here, I got 5 written down a bunch. What have you seen from Jayden Daniels so far? He and Marcus are splitting reps. Jayden's been the first guy out in a lot of the situational stuff. Marcus has been number one in the other stuff. But they're mixing and matching personnel so much. It's, they're both kind of working evenly with the 1 O-line, the 1 starters. But as operationally, what have you seen from Jayden so far?
Yeah, it's just to be clear, so when he goes out first, sometimes he's going out with the 2s, Jayden. Mm-hmm. And again, it doesn't mean that he's starting or that they've made a decision yet. They're all kind of working evenly. And I will say they've done a really good job. In past camps, it's been oh, these guys are going to start, or this is what they're thinking. And I feel like this group specifically, you have an idea, but they're so good at rotating people through and kind of presenting different packages. You're kind of is this guy starting? Is that guy working with this guy? Or are they just working in tandem here? So I do think that I don't know if that's intentional, but that's something I've noticed a little bit this offseason. So, yeah, with Jayden, I think in the red zone, man, I expected it, honestly, for him to come out and struggle a little bit over the first 2 days, and that has not really been the case. I think he's done a good job of understanding the coverage, understanding where the ball should go. Today there was one where I was all ready to be mad at him. He looked to the corner. It was man coverage. He didn't let it go, rightfully so. And I thought, he's going to take a sack here. And he's so quick with his feet in the pocket. Quick reset, and he knew exactly where the ball needed to go. So I was like, dang, that's pretty big-time stuff. The way he's anticipating throws. I know this wasn't in the red zone, but he had that beautiful throw to Zach Ertz today. They had a little, kind of what I would call a Tony concept, an out and a go, and a high cross. It's Y cross. It's every high school play in the country runs it. And I was like, nobody's open. This play's dead. He anticipated the throw. Zach ran a great route, the dark arts of route running, like we always talk about, taking an awesome angle to cut the safety off. Great catch. And I just was like, man, that's cool to see day 2 of training camp. And again, it's not always with a rush, which is the other thing that we need to negotiate here with him. But I do think that his process and how he's been working through his stuff, especially when compared to Marcus Mariota, just seems to be pretty locked in, wouldn't you say, Craig?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the difference in the 2 of them is pretty stark. And it's the exact opposite of what it should be based off their experience levels. You should see the rookie struggling to decipher what is going on and where the ball should go accordingly. And instead, Marcus is out there running around, holding the ball too long, scrambling, trying to extend plays where there's stuff to be had. And it just doesn't look nearly as fluid. I think that the other thing that really has stood out between the 2 of them that feels backwards based off their experience is the situational work. One thing I wrote down today in the move the ball drill. So it was 1:25 on the clock. I think they had about 50 yards. They might have lined it up at the 45, but they're midfield area. I didn't see. We were kind of in the end zone watching it, so it was hard to see exactly where they started. But 1:25, basically half the field to go, and the amount of plays that Jayden got off in that drill, it was a 12-play drive. It was ridiculous. And the ability to
about at the end of practice there today, right?
Yeah, to manage the clock like that and go all right, we got, this, I got to get out of bounds. Okay, hit it, bang, out of bounds. Here, we got to spike it. We got he managed that so well, and the sheer volume of plays they were able to get off because he was able to execute the right thing at the right time was really, really impressive. He drew defense off sides a couple times throughout practice today. There's just a command of quarterbacking and situations and kind of the game that just is so high level for a kid his age and his experience level. And that is really exciting because that stuff is harder, I feel like, to teach. And it also shows a mental capacity to process a lot of information. And we'll see what happens again. That's all fine until John Allen comes up the A gap, and then it's even worse when it's Vita Vea week 1. But to show that proclivity already is I think really impressive and I also think meaningful.
Yeah, no, I think so. And again, he's not. I feel like I have to say this every time we talk about him because I think he is doing a good job. I think the ball comes out well. I think his anticipation's good. I think his footwork's been good. But he still is, there's a lot of things he still needs to work on. There's times where in 7-on-7, I think he's holding the ball a tick too long. And that's a big pet peeve of mine, even back when I was playing. 7-on-7, because there's no rush, it's not real. But again, he's in the test that he's being provided, he's doing a good job, which I appreciate, And so again, like he's still a rookie. He's still working through some stuff. I think we've been really impressed overall. But yeah, man, he just gets it. He just gets where the ball needs to go and when it needs to be there. Someone came up to me today and says like, oh, do you think that ball that he missed to Zach today is a bad thing? And I was like, absolutely not, because he's on time and Zach gets held. So it's not Zach's fault either. The defense probably would have got a PI. But I think like that's what you want your quarterback doing. That's what makes Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, that's what makes them great, is they can throw to space, anticipating windows in the defense based on the concept. So I think he's done that well. And I think watching him more in the team setting, more with the rush, because again, that's the one thing that I haven't really seen from him. I've been really impressed with the tight window throws here in the red zone. Again, like to see more of that because that was something he didn't do a lot of in college, but it all seems to be progressing in the right way. And your comparison to Marcus, I think, is very on the nose. I think Marcus, for whatever reason, there's times where he delivers a great ball and you're like, wow, there you go. That's a guy who's played a lot of NFL football.
Yeah, he had a deep ball to Terry today, and his move the ball drill, that was money.
It was money. And again, you see the talent, you see his athleticism. He had a scramble today that probably went for a touchdown. Like, it's there, but there's also stuff where you're like, dang. And so I think just the level of consistency over 2 days of practice, right? Let's just put that modifier out there, has been much higher for Jaden.
For sure. I'm curious on Jaden. Like one play that comes to mind is the end of that move the ball drill. He throws a touchdown to McNichols. It's a little late. It's a little off schedule. But I feel like on some of those plays, like Jaden has the ability to manipulate the pocket in a way that's real. That's not just because he's not getting sacked because it's training camp, but that's like real pocket manipulation. A little bit of extra time gets bought, and then he knows whether he knows or he has a very high level ability to find what pops in those scramble situations. Like, oh, that's chaos. That's chaos. That means there's space over there. And oh, look, it's Jeremy McNichols. Oh, look, it's Luke McCaffrey. Oh, look, it's whatever guy is wide open in the end zone because something else went haywire because I've extended this play. Is that real, or is that because he's getting to, or is it because he's getting to play longer because people aren't actually sacking him?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. It's hard to tell. Like I will say on that series, there was let's just walk through it. So 3 plays before, Norrell Pollard, I think, probably has a sack. Like that little stumpy kind of sawed-off explosive dude from Virginia Tech just gets out on the cadence, swims the center, for sure a sack. Ball gets out, it's completed. Great job, Jaden. But that's in real life, that's probably a sack, right? Next play, Jaden draws him off sides, right? So Pollard goes out because he jumped off sides, and so does the left end. I forget who it was. Both jumped off sides. They're both out. The next play after that is a touchdown. And I would say that like using cadence in that way, drawing those guys off sides, understanding what the defensive line is doing and what they're trying to get accomplished, using cadence to slow them down and give your offensive line a better opportunity. And then again, like reading that concept out and understanding like, there's like a little sit concept with a flat, nothing too crazy. He looks at the sit, the defense kind of miscommunicates it. Like you said, he buys a little bit of time, floats that ball right to McNichols, kind of over the shoulder in the front of the end zone there. And that felt real to me. Now, I can't see the rush. I can't see the protection. But I do think if you look at the sequence there and how he set that up using his cadence, I think that's real. And that's good football. And that's being smart. And great job by the offensive line not jumping offside. So I think that's the other thing that sticks out is like good process, way to get it communicated, and then understanding kind of how to maximize your O-line. Everyone talks about the O-line and how worried we need to be, but if you use tools like cadence, like running the football, they had some big runs today in team run. I don't know if you saw some of those. Those were great.
Yeah.
But that type of stuff, I think, is going to pay dividends. And again, you have a quarterback who can help you execute that. That just makes it all the easier.
Yeah, Eckler, nice big one on a duo. You're like, oh, that's duo, and I was like, oh, that's Eckler running.
Yeah,
got through clean on that one. So yeah, that was good to see today, and obviously much more excited to evaluate the running game once the pads go on. But to just from a timing standpoint, get the combinations and things right, to get things actually targeted correctly. That's good stuff, and about as good as you can do this time of year. The other thing that I thought was interesting on the quarterback front, before we get to a couple of other guys we want to talk about, is during that move the ball drill with Mariota, he just kept going to Terry.
Yeah.
Terry on Forbes. Forbes had a couple of nice plays. Terry got him for the big one deep, got him for another short one. But it was a fun battle between those two, which is great. But I'm also curious. I would love to be able to watch the practice tape and be like, all right, was it man and you're just picking your matchup? Like, why were you so insistent on going to 17? Because as someone who's been begging for Terry to get the ball for years, I'm excited about it, but that did seem like a lot in one drill.
Yeah, I kind of was like, we were talking on the sideline, like, is this like just the philosophy now? Like when you're if I'm Marcus Mariota and I'm having a hard time seeing it, like, I'm just going to throw the ball to Terry a bunch.
Heineke left him a bleep it. Terry's down there somewhere, shirt behind.
Yeah, it's in his locker somewhere. But that's kind of what it felt like. And you know, kudos to Forbes, man. I thought he did a great job in that sequence of battling, being physical, using his length. Obviously, there was the deep one, which we couldn't decide. You know, like when you're watching practice, like I was watching like the core, and then you see the ball go and you see him want to go. It felt like it might have been a double move. But,
right.
You know, and that's something that Forbes has to work on or continue to work on. But I just thought there was a physicality, a competitiveness, all the things we saw from him in college, all the highlights we saw from him, for example, in that New England game last year, like I thought were there. You know, and Terry's going to get his because Terry's a good football player. But I thought that was encouraging for Terry. It was encouraging to see Mariota's confidence in Terry, but it was also encouraging to see the level of kind of dog competitor that we got from Forbes. And he's been again, I thought he had a good offseason, but to see that and know that they're coming after you and kind of stick in there and make plays, like I thought that was a good character moment for him. And so it was a really kind of a fun sequence. And that's, again, like it's hard to glean a ton from training camp, but those are cool moments where you're like, okay, like that's something I'm going to keep an eye on. Like has Forbes turned a corner from that competitive compete standpoint? Terry's looking in good shape. Like does that chemistry with Marcus and Terry lead to something down the road? But that was a pretty neat sequence.
Yeah, I will say if Marcus winds up being the backup, to come in and just be like, I'm going to throw to Terry a lot, that's a good plan as a backup.
Yeah.
And if you're Marcus, like throw to Terry or run. Running for Marcus is a good thing.
Yeah, he did score that touchdown today, you know, which is great.
No, that was, reason he was who he was coming out of school, coming out of that Oregon offense with Chip back in the day. All right, that was from Take Command. If you want more thoughts on Emmanuel Forbes and Jamin Davis, you got to check out the rest of the podcast, which you got all weekend to do. Just search Take Command in your favorite podcast app, including the free Odyssey app, and we will be right there. Speaking of podcasts, we'll give you a little tease on what you might have missed on the show today that you can check out in our podcast, and real things real people said into real microphones next.
Here's what's trending.
All right, wrapping up here on the Hoffman Show. Team 980, always live on the free Odyssey app. If you have missed any part of the show, well, good news. You got a whole weekend to catch up. That's the beauty of the Friday podcast, or the Friday show, as we wrap up here and we tell you, hey, we have a podcast. You missed it. We tell you every day. We remind you. It tells you to subscribe so that it comes right to your phone, your favorite listening device, your iPad, whatever it is, your laptop. Maybe you listen while you're working, whatever it is. You got a whole weekend. We're not going to bombard you with new episodes tomorrow. No, we're done. In 7 minutes, I'm going to stop talking. And then if you want to listen to me this weekend, it's on your time. The Hoffman Show podcast, anywhere you want it, anytime, anywhere, on demand, on your schedule, including from today that you might have missed, our chat with Nicki Jhabvala of the Washington Post. She joined us at 5 o'clock for Not My Beat. Talked a whole lot of football stuff on the field and how the Commanders are doing so far. But we wrapped the interview with the best thing that we heard today. I asked Nicki, what's the best conversation you've had in training camp so far? And this is what she said.
I feel like every conversation with John Ridgway is fantastic because he's hilarious. I feel like John Ridgway, if he weren't playing football, and maybe he does pursue this as a, second career when he's done playing, absolutely should be in WWE. I just think he's a character. So I grabbed him after a practice day one because I know the dude is thin. I'm like, dude, you lost half your body weight. He's like, yeah, I dropped 20 pounds or whatever. And we were talking about it. He just has these funny one-liners. Like, yeah, I mean, Action Bronson did this. I mean, he's a big dude. He lost a bunch of weight. So I let me try it. I'm like, okay. Sure. But he's like, yeah, no McDonald's, no Five Guys. I really like Italian food. Can't have that. I'm like, oh man, so what do you do? He's like, just chicken or meat and then some vegetables, walk in the truck. But it's the way he delivers, just so matter of fact. I'm like, just honest. It was great. Yeah, he was a pretty funny interview. He always is. He's just honest.
Yeah, Ridgway is definitely known as a character. There's a couple good ones on this team. Matt, I don't know what interviews has Russell done so far. What has he gotten? He got anything really, really good that people should check out this weekend?
I'm pretty sure we got Mikey Sammers still.
Oh, he's great.
Oh, he was fantastic. And one thing I will say, we got a bunch of the rookies right after the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say that we had a bad interview. I think all of the rookies, and one of the things that I'm seeing with this Dan Quinn team and Adam Peters, they bring in people with character.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your boring Joes. It's people that are coming in with character, drive, emotion, energy, and I love that.
Yeah, we finally had a bad podium today. Jeremy Chin just didn't seem like he was that interested in talking. I was reading the transcript. Maybe it's just he's soft spoken. I don't know him at all. But the guys they brought in, great talkers, good stuff. We had Allegretti and St. Juice earlier this week. Obviously, Allegretti's a new guy. Incredible interview. You realize how hard it is to get 10 minutes with a guy after practice? Allegretti, I could have talked to for half an hour. He was awesome. So people can check that out. Or if you want to, watch it, especially those interviews on YouTube, at Craig Hoffman or at the Team 980. All right, last but not least, you know how we end this thing. It's time for Real Things Real People Said into real microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
The culture is actually damn good.
Damn good, he said. Damn good. The Olympics are here, which means we get all kinds of great stuff. I was scrolling Instagram a little bit earlier in a commercial break, and I was going to almost send one for Real Things, Matt, that had a athlete just absolutely freaking out after seeing Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price in the Olympic Village. And that's the cool thing is yes, these are all Olympians, but they have so much respect for people in other sports that I saw one of the U.S. marathoners who was so psyched to take a picture with Anthony Edwards because Anthony Edwards was psyched to take a picture with her. And it's wait, he wants to take a picture with me? I want to take a picture with him. And that's just within Team USA, nevertheless across the world. So yeah, that's just super cool. But you also get cool groups of people together that typically are not, such as the U.S. men's basketball team and their social media team asked, starting with LeBron James, who has the best nickname on the team?
Best nickname on the team? No, it ain't the Browns. It's a time for me.
King James and Chef Curry.
King James is elite. Chef Curry elite. D White, yeah, does that count? That's like saying Book is a nickname.
That's not a real nick. That's just your name of starting.
Bam Monte. Bam Monte.
Bam Monte. So the last Olympics, JaVale McGee asked him what his real name was. He was like, it's probably Bam Monte or something.
What's his real name?
Bam.
You think JT knows it?
I know his social security number, middle name, the Idris.
Who has the best nickname on this team? Best nickname on the team.
The Process. He put in a group chat and announced himself as The Process.
King James, probably. That's it.
Drew Holiday needs a nickname.
What's it going to be?
I'm not creative. That's why I'm asking the people.
King, Slim Reaper, Chef. You call him?
I call him Easy Money. Tarantula was called too.
A lot of guys said you.
Slim Reaper. I love that nickname. Before, I didn't think I was worthy enough for it. I didn't do enough yet. Now?
I always thought Durant hated Slim Reaper. I thought it was a sick nickname. And, well, now we know. We can call Durant Slim Reaper again because you got it. I mean, it's hard to beat King James when you actually live up to that nickname. That's pretty good. All right, that's our show. Thanks so much for listening. See you Monday. Have a great weekend.